Welcome to my video on the 2007 movie Sunshine. I am going to start with a review with absolutely no spoilers for this or anything else. And once I'm done with the review itself, I will verbally let you know that I'm getting into spoilers so you can safely watch up to that point, even if you haven't watched the movie and don't want it spoiled for you. Yes, do not attempt to adjust your set. I am indeed talking about something scary during Halloween month that isn't The Walking Dead. Seriously though, I am loving talking so much about The Walking Dead. I hope you enjoy watching so much of it, and I do try to usually, split up a little bit more these days outside of Arrowverse. Now, I guess I'll start with just noting. Right. Yes. Before I get into those details, this movie is rated R, and so will this video be. And this is a movie that I really, really love. So the I think this is the very best of the way that Alex Garland's writing and Danny Boyle's direction just really come together to create something spectacular. Yeah, I think this might be the very best, in my opinion, that that's ever been so far. I mean, hopefully they will make more. And let's see. Yeah, I think let's start with the so the core setup. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but basically we are following a spaceship where the crew are trying to basically save the sun in order to save Earth. And it's fascinating to me that part of how this even came to be was that, like, I forget if it was Garland, Boyle, maybe both. Like they realized there's really not that many science fiction movies about the sun, which is such a baffling thing because, like, it's literally one of the most important things for life on Earth, and yeah, um, the I think I am gonna limit it to that as far as the setup goes. It on the surface, it is a very straightforward setup of, crew of people are on this mission to do something extremely important, and yeah, we follow that, and within that framework, it manages to do something that a lot of stories like this don't. Now, I think I'm gonna briefly talk about the the psychological accuracy. The various characters here, it's very much this thing of they behave realistically. They will sometimes do things that you find very frustrating for them to be doing, but I a lot of the time I have a fairly low tolerance for stuff like that. I think you have to work very hard to make that not really obnoxious. It's one of those things like the Friday the 13th films, which again, I think they're essentially fast food. If you're in the mood for fast food, they'll get the job done. They are wall to wall people making terrible decisions, and sometimes it's for no reason at all. Sometimes it's just because the writers have decided they want us to hate a certain character and shit like that. And this movie and The Thing do fantastic at, in my opinion, making it like we can always understand why they're doing what they're doing. And though it's sometimes very, very difficult to make a horror story work if you never ever have a character do something that they probably shouldn't. That is extremely difficult, let alone the fact that a lot of horror stories are morality tales. We're supposed to be seeing someone do a thing that we're supposed to then say, oh, I shouldn't do that because look at what happened to them, kind of thing. And this one, I don't know that I want to say. I'll just say yeah, I find that I can follow why the different characters do what they do, and there's no character that I just find myself thinking, oh, fucking this person again, really, kind of thing. I can appreciate that. I think some people might feel that way about at least one of them. Yeah, I think that does cover that. So the psychological accuracy is tremendously high. The authenticity is pretty much off the charts. Like it's whenever you sit down with science fiction, there's always this thing of like, well, is it credible? Which, to be clear, I don't think every piece of media has to be. In fact, I would argue it should only be a fraction of media, the fiction media, I mean, that should be entirely, like 100% be the way that it would be in real life. There's just so much you lose out on if you insist on 100% accuracy. With that said, when it comes to science fiction, it can be very frustrating to watch something and be like, well, that's not how that would work, though, And this is one of those movies that understands you can actually get a unreal amount of tension and suspense out of keeping it extremely realistic, because like one of the main things that we all know about space is that it will fucking murder you and not think twice. Like it has nothing to lose. And I really appreciate the way that this movie, like they sat down and really thought about what are the, some of the most horrifying ways that one could die in space or on a space vessel, and have us worry that that's going to happen to the characters. I'm not going to give away whether or not it does, but it is a movie that is extremely clear on, listen, one fucking mistake and they're dead. Like there's just nothing. So that's something that's an area where it's great that it is so authentic. The level of detail is also quite high. You really, and that's another aspect of science fiction, because it's something that Okay, so it's literally a story wherein they have to get close enough to the sun to be able to. I don't know if I want to give away in the review itself what exactly they're doing, but they have to get, significantly closer to the sun than one would want. They're going to get one hell of a tan. And that already is like, you know, that's something that is, it is essentially science fiction, but they really took care to think of, well, how would this work though? How would you get that close to the sun? And I really love the way that there's a lot of things in this movie where they don't just have a massive exposition dump. That's again, I think I've said it in every fucking video I've done on a movie written by Alex Garland. Sue me. He's amazing at exposition. Like this, like the others, he manages to convey important information that could only be delivered to us verbally, and do it in a way where we don't even realize that that's what's happening, you know? Just, yeah. There's not one instance in this movie of two characters, or more for that matter, like having a conversation where it's like, you both know this. Why are you saying it out loud? Do you know there's an audience watching you? And there's so many things in this movie where you understand what is happening and how something works by seeing, it in action or someone interact with it in some way. There's so many things where, like, if this movie had been made several decades earlier, there would have been nonstop, like, just verbal diarrhea. Every single, fraction of a second of this movie would be wall to wall explaining how shit works. There was a time when that was thought. If you go far back enough, some of the oldest movies, some of which I love. I'm not one of those people, and I know, if you look at me and think, young guy, no, I fucking love, I can still sit down and watch Maltese Falcon and, Postman Always Rings Twice. God damn it, what was the Double Indemnity? You know, yeah, some of my favorite movies are some of the oldest movies ever made. But yeah, there was a time when movies were essentially thought of as, well, okay, there's like a screen, people watch it on a screen, but it's like a theater show, right? So let's just plant the camera in one place and let's have people talk. We'll make it we'll make the conversations interesting. We'll have people say cool things in a cool way, not always cool, but compelling. But yeah, this is a movie that benefits tremendously from just the visual storytelling. Like, when you've watched this movie all the way through at least once, you will most likely have a decent idea of, you could explain, like, if someone hadn't watched the movie and you had to explain, you could probably explain how the different things on the surface, I mean, not like in huge detail, but you could explain why that particular thing does this other thing and how, in the, yeah, bare bones kind of way, And I would argue that there's not a single thing in this movie where the fact that you only really understand a thing by witnessing it a lot of the time impedes, because like, it could be a huge problem, if you watch this movie and you find yourself genuinely confused, I would recommend talking to someone who's watched the movie or going online. You technically already are online if you're watching this, so you took that first step. But there are some pieces of media where the fact that we only understand how a thing works, by seeing it, has a negative impact on, you don't want your audience too confused. And that's another thing that this duo are so good at, like finding the right balance of how much information the audience should have, because they do want us to not know, each of these movies that they've made together. And every, let's see, I've only watched a few of Garland, the ones he's directed himself. Well, I guess I've watched most of them. Anyway, Ex Machina, um, Annihilation, and Civil War. In each of these, there is something that, Garland makes sure that we know just enough to be intrigued, not so little that we find it frustrating, like with Damon Lindelof. If you haven't already, I don't even know if it's up anymore, but the College Humor had a video at least. I think it is just called God, Damon Lindelof is Annoying, and it explains perfectly the problem with a lot of his, one of his work that I've watched. Holy shit, is it just Lost? No, wait, yeah, also Prometheus. Anyway, so I'm not going to repeat here what they delivered impeccably there. But yeah, not so little that we have that issue, but also not so much that we feel like, oh, I know where this is going. Like, with each of these, the very first time I watched, I genuinely did not see coming how they ending up. So the tone is quite harsh, with little glimmers of positive, yeah. I feel like that does describe Alex Garland's writing fairly well. But it's one of those things where that's another, if that's your approach, then you'll want to make sure that what you are making is aided by that instead of it hurting it. And so far, what I've watched, I do think that was the case. And this is especially one of the ones where you're like, I mean, yeah, they are serious people on an extremely serious mission. There's a at one point, a character says, there is nothing more important than us succeeding on our mission. So yeah, sometimes they'll like make a joke or smile about something or the like, but a bunch of the time it is more like, okay, we gotta focus. If we let go, if we fumble, that's it. Like, just and that's also something I quite appreciated, because sometimes you have that issue with science fiction, but no, here they explain why. No, this is the last chance. There is not going to be another. If they fail, Earth fucking dies, And that's one of those things where I've shown this movie to, is it about half a dozen people total? And every one of them had the same feeling as I did. That not all of them ended up loving the movie as I do, but all of us agree that is a genuinely compelling. I'm not saying it's the first time we've seen it, but it part of it is, again, the tone, the fact that it does feel like, because some movies where it's like, well, if you fail, that's it. Some of those movies end up not, you know, it doesn't completely land. And here it really does. Like I spend, and people I've recommended it to, some of them spend this entire movie just on the edge of our seats, just hoping that it's actually going to succeed. And the dialogue is, it's again this thing of Garland is, this is actually, I think this is the only, oh no, yeah, let's see. Okay, it is not the most common thing for him to write essentially ensemble pieces. It's not impossible. That let's see, I think there's 2 movies he's directed that I haven't watched. um Maybe it's different there. This and Annihilation, I think, are the only, I don't know, I guess there's some of that going on in The Beach. But mostly it's not, there's not so many characters that it quite qualifies as ensemble. But here and Annihilation very much so. And in both of them, it helps that they are all very much on a mission. They have very clearly defined roles. They are, see, it's important that I word this right, because I don't want you walking away thinking that they're one-dimensional, but they are very much each defined by their very specific, unique skill set. They don't have like 2 of any of the, each of them has one, they have one job, and they're gonna do it. And yeah, I don't know, I feel like he's so good at making, because like, you look at the different things that the characters say, and genuinely, like, there are so many lines here that could only be said by the character they're said by. And like, if you read a description of each character and maybe saw a little bit of the performance, and you didn't watch the rest of the movie, but somebody handed you a bunch of lines that were not attributed to their characters, by and large, you'd be able to pair them up with the actual character that says that. And the direction, this is some of Danny Boyle's most self-assured direction. I don't, I haven't watched all his movies. I barely think he's made a bad movie of what I've seen. I guess Slumdog Millionaire is the only one where, I don't know. I don't know if it's bad. It's been so long since I watched it, maybe 10 years or something, but I was a little bit let down by it. Other than that, these movies that he's made, yeah, you always get this really strong sense that he knows exactly what he's doing. He has us exactly where he wants us. And this is in part, he's taking on, that's one of the things I love about him. He really tries to avoid making the same movie twice. And I acknowledge he's made like, few sequels, but by and large, he has a recognizable style. But there are movies like, the movie Millions, you would not guess was made by the guy who made Trainspotting, 28 days later. I mean, okay, there's some stuff in there that does feel like, but he actually made a proper kids movie. Well, somewhat. There's a little bit of stuff I talk about in my video on it in the spoiler free section, but yeah, it doesn't feel like he just wants to keep playing the same note, no matter how beloved that note is. And same thing with Garland. And this, I think I'm going to briefly talk about some of the inspirations. He brings up Alien for the, let's see if I can recall. I think he worded it as Victorian Gothic. And yeah, that's present here as well. It's a similar thing. In addition, it takes some inspiration from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and yeah, to get the obvious out of the way, no, it doesn't top it. Like, I don't know that anything could. I'm not making excuses for, Kubrick was genuinely abusive towards Shelley Duvall and other actors as well. I'm not making any excuses for him as a person. I'm talking about the craft. And I'm 100%, I'm in the process of figuring out exactly how I feel about, separating the art from the artist. I've heard good arguments in either direction. But let's see. It's one of those things where okay, I'll add one more. So Solaris, the good one, not the pretty disappointing one. Like, I usually love Steven Soderbergh and George Clooney, and I don't know what the fuck they were thinking on that one. Like, just, if you're gonna watch Solaris, watch the original, and I'm not one of those people who say, oh, you always have to, the original's always better. I think there's stuff that absolutely works about the remake of Assault on Precinct 13, for example. There are movies where it really works to remake it. Like, some people forget that 1982's The Thing is technically a remake. I personally think that remake is better than the original. I try to go, case by case. I think it's very limiting to just blanket say the remake is always better or worse. Yeah. So Alien, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Solaris, like this movie, capture how threatening space can be, and like this contrast between the fact that we are technically able to make craft that are able to take us into space, take us away from Earth, but at the same time, we are such fragile creatures, and the way that we can get to a place where it is possible to make these crafts, and even like go on like incredibly difficult missions in space, and be get to a place where that, I don't want to use the word commonplace, but it ends up feeling like, okay, we got this. We can actually do this. But there's still that ever-present reminder that it would take almost nothing for us to perish, in a way that just, like if you're on board a plane that is, crashing, which, I don't know, maybe that's going to happen now that Trump and Doge got rid of a bunch of qualified people who had extremely important jobs, specifically, some of them specifically for actually making sure planes could take off and fucking land. Jesus Christ. Anyway, if you're on a plane that is crashing, if you have access to a parachute, you may be able to survive. If you jump out in time and the parachute and everything works out. If you are on a spaceship and like there's a tear in the outer layer, you might die and not be able to do anything about it, And I guess it's important to spell out. I am not calling this movie a ripoff. I'm talking about how it riffs on classics. And honestly, you know what? Throw Silent Running in there. I wish more people... I struggle to find people who fucking watch that movie. I think I might at some point make a video on it. Yeah. I really, really... There's a lot I love about that movie. Now, I think that does more or less, yeah. But, this is not the only time that Garland goes for some Andrei Tarkovsky, There's a lot in Annihilation as well. Yeah, I think that might just about cover... I think part of what works so well here is that it's this very, you have this very distinct visual style, of Boyle. On the commentary track, he himself points out, in movies you have to move fast, and the fact that he manages to like present us with this, like we have this group of people, we have this very clear goal, and there's really not an ounce of fat on this. Like they trimmed it down as much as they could to the point where it really is all about, like, everything is the mission and or the themes. Like, I think I can defend everything that happens in the movie, every like conversation, etc., as relating to plot and or themes. And yeah, it would have been a lesser movie if not for that. And I think that might pretty much cover that aspect. Yeah, I think, the first time, when I first heard about this movie, I was intrigued, but I was a tiny bit concerned, because it's like the guy who made Trainspotting and 28 Days Later is going to make this sci-fi spaceship movie, like it doesn't feel like a very natural fit. And I really appreciate that he does actually... It doesn't feel like he's trying to warp the script to suit his direction. There is the very recognizable visuals that he's known for, but he uses it somewhat sparingly in a way that, yeah, when it works for this, he engages in that, but he doesn't try to force it in. It feels like it arises naturally in each of these movies. It's just that, I will admit, I don't think I've watched it in like 10, 15 years, maybe more. But Trainspotting, from what I recall, is a bit more like, that one's almost like to the level of like a Guy Ritchie. I mean, visually. That from what I recall, that one has just really goes hard on those. And yeah, like for that, I mean, it's about people who are on drugs. So, yeah, visual makes a lot of sense. And here, very, very pared down. So the cinematography and editing, I am in awe of how well, like, so it captures the loneliness of space and of being stuck on this spacecraft. And at the same time, there are these, like, it captures the majesty of space, of the sun. I mean, shit. Yeah, okay. That is definitely something for the spoiler section. I'm making a mental note to bring that up when I talk spoilers, because that's going to give too much away. But yeah, I mean, there's times where it's like claustrophobic. There's times where it, the it's a movie that understands scale to a tremendous degree. Like there are these shots. See, the thing is that the ship itself is quite big for this relatively small group of people. And that's, of course, like, you don't want something like that to be cramped. And again, like I said earlier, everything has a purpose. It's not that size for no good reason. It captures that, and also how small the ship is compared to the sun. And just, yeah, it's I think I've hopefully made my point. And I talk about in my video on 28 Days Later my thoughts on the handheld photography of that movie. I'm glad that he didn't go with it for this one. And I don't know that he ever really considered, in part, it was a budgetary decision for that one, where this one has the budget to not have to hide things. If you're making a horror movie, it works for some other genres as well. But if you're making a horror movie, if you don't have a huge amount of money, imply stuff, have it happen just off screen, because that's much, much less budget intensive, But yeah, I appreciate that there are times in this where handheld made sense and they went for that. And yeah, like when we are meant to get a very clear read on what's happening, we do, without fail. Again, I would argue, the times where it is discombobulating, where it's chaotic, disorienting, it's very purposeful. And the contrast is so effective. You go, you have these scenes where you are 100% clear on the visual, yeah. And then you have these scenes where it is very disorienting, and like, I think sometimes it works to go for disorienting all the time. I think it would have been disastrous if this was constantly, for example, some of the scenes where the visual clarity is very high, is when some of the scenes where we are deducing what a thing does by seeing it in action or seeing someone interact with it in some way. And I guess I've pretty much said what I wanted about how it's trimmed down. Let's see. Yeah, the editing also, they are careful to use both cinematography and editing to keep the same places, sets, interesting throughout the movie. Because that's another thing with sci-fi. Sometimes they will just show the same set from the same angle over and over, and it's like, okay, you got to have something really exciting happen on these sets. And they do have some of that as well, but it's a really good idea, because it is like it's a space mission movie. So yeah, you have characters saying over the radio or whatever the equivalent. I'm not entirely sure if it's called radio when it's space mission, but they're saying we're gonna go do this thing, Roger, over, kind of thing, and that can get really boring. We've seen it so many fucking times, not always in space. And yeah, they managed to. There's just enough of stuff like that. So I don't want to give too much of it away, but I'll just say there's this great bit where like we see one of the people at the computer and like they're reading a book, because like the computer does so much of it for them already, so they're at the computer, they're ready in case something, but they're reading a book, they're not looking at readouts, and just that tiny little detail, that like so many filmmakers would never have thought of. It just conveys so much. And that's another thing. It is very challenging to convey boredom to an audience without replicating it, and you really don't want the audience bored. Well, maybe you do, but in this case you don't. The production value is fantastic, like every step of the way. Like, this is one of those things where if I hadn't seen any behind the scenes and like someone came out and like said, whistleblowing, that movie was not fiction. They actually did that. That's a real spaceship. And, like, okay, if you've got like pictures and documentation that backs that up, I'd be like, well, shit, I guess maybe, which there's a lot of space movies I cannot say that about, and it's one of those things, like, it didn't have the hugest budget, but it uses it exactly right. There are so many decisions in there that where they really thought through, okay, what will look convincing and expensive without feeling gaudy, And yeah, the set design, Jesus Christ, I really feel, I guess I've already said it, but it feels so real to see these, yeah. And the yeah, so costumes and makeup, very shaved down, because it's a space mission. They're not dressed to impress anyone. What they wear is basically just what would be comfortable and suitable for it. And yet they do still manage to make, there are several characters where what they wear really does convey something in a subtle way. The music, I think this might be my favorite. I'm I'm afraid I'd fuck up his name, and I can't look it up right now because my wrists are pretty fucked right now. But this is the same guy who did 28 Days Later, and I think he's made other. He's scored other of Boyle's films. I think this might be my favorite score of his. It There are times where it is very subtle. It's always effective. There are points in this where the music almost gets too much. It stops just short of exhausting us, and it's so unbelievably effective. And yeah, like, you know, if you're gonna go big on any movie, saving the world, you know, that's where something like that makes a ton of sense. And the sound design is spot on. There are just these little things where it has the exact right, like, crunchiness. It feels like there's something there. I know I've said it before, but sound design is one of the most important things in horror and or sci-fi. You know, whether you're making one or both of those genre, you know, piece of media within those, it can do so much, and if it's bad, it can sink the whole thing. You end up like, you can test it. You can try to watch some of the best horror and or sci-fi that you've ever watched. Mute it. Um, you're gonna see, like, suddenly it feels like, oh wow, that, you know, it's not very convincing without the sound design. So the characters. This is an area where there there is at least one critic out there, and I'm not saying, you know, oh, I hate this person. I disagree with, you know, I forget if it's more than one, but there's at least one critic who said that they never felt, or okay, I don't disagree because they're expressing their opinion. I'm saying I did not have that experience at all. I feel very intensely while watching this. Now, I think this is a good time to bring up, if you have access to them. Once you watch the movie, watch the deleted scenes. They do help with some, yeah. And there's also stuff cut that, like, this is one of those cases where, God, I think it's because it failed financially at the box office, if I recall correctly. So, because this is one of those movies where some of these deleted scenes, it would be wonderful to see a proper director's cut. Right, if you haven't already, Jacob Geller did a really solid video on this movie. But yeah, I would love to see some of these deleted scenes reintegrated into the movie, because it doesn't quite have the same effect to just watch them separately. And there is at least one of them, I'll talk about in the spoiler section, where I feel like it's almost missing from the final film. It's you find yourself, yeah, yes, right. And I guess at this point I might as well plug. So the my DVD at least comes with a commentary track by Danny Boyle himself. Excellent. He really helps you better appreciate what he was thinking, and, you know, he explains certain very technical things in a just wonderful way. There's also one by Brian Cox. No, not that one. Professor Brian Cox. Let's see. I want to say physicist. He's a scientist of some kind. He's a scientician, and I recommend both of these. I recommend everything on the DVD, really. He Not every scientist is equally good at communicating to us lay people, you know, people who get laid. And, you know, I have to admit, I've only heard that this is, Bill Nye, the science guy, is also really gifted at that. I never watched. Yeah, I guess it was just called Bill Nye, the science guy. But I understand he did tremendous work to help educate. Uh, you know, a generation, maybe multiple. I forget how long it was on. Although a non-zero number of those people then grew up to watch the more recent incarnation and get really upset that he correctly used the term cisgender. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. But yeah, that's already been talked about. I think was it H Bomber guy maybe who did a really fantastic video talking about the conservative reception to the more recent version. Anyway, the commentary track with Professor Cox Dr. Cox really helps to you understand better some of the things where you can see what the thing does, but you don't understand exactly why it would work like that, but enough that you, in my opinion, in my experience, I don't have an issue with it. I can't speak for everyone. And he also, he says, he pretty early agree, yeah, we're not going to just have, we're not going to spend, let's see, not everything is going to be 100% realistic. If the movie is better with it being somewhat unrealistic. And he's honest enough to call out he apparently made a few scientific mistakes, and he points them out to help correct that. But even with deleted scenes, behind the scenes, commentary scenes, tracks, there's still stuff that you kind of have to deduce. There was written detailed backgrounds for each of the characters, and these backgrounds were given to the actors playing the characters and the costume wardrobe department. So you can get some of it from watching, but there are other things that, yeah, like I read it on the internet and I was like, oh, I guess I can see that, but I would never have guessed it from just watching. And in my opinion, there's, I find that there's just enough. I am deeply engaged with these characters, and I am sometimes very difficult to satisfy with. I really don't like one-note characters. I don't like if a character is just, like, yeah, I guess the word one-note covers it. 2 words? It's 2 words, Larry. And I do acknowledge that is, I don't know if it's a bug or a feature. I think that might depend on, it varies from person to person, like the taste of Soylent Cola. I find that it really works for me the way that Garland, he seems like he wants there to be sort of the bare minimum for a number of his characters, including sometimes his leads. We don't know that much about the lead in The Beach, in 28 Days Later, like we get just enough that we like, the one in The Beach, I don't know if we're supposed to like him, but we get enough to get a sense of who he, the kind of douchebag he is. And you know, yeah, 28 days later, yeah, we get, you know, okay, he's just a regular person, you know, caught in this extreme circumstance, you know. And I think for some people it works okay in those movies, in part because there are less major characters than in this one, and it is less, let's see, I guess that's a spoiler, but I get that, you know, and again, like, you know, he does it here, he does it in Annihilation. Like, we don't necessarily know that much about these characters, and I 100% understand why some people really can't stand that. And certainly I find it, I I figured it must be. I only read the headline, again, bad wrists. The summary, whatever, of the review that said, you know, they didn't feel anything. Essentially, the only thing I can figure is they mean that the characters, they didn't know enough to get invested, because I find it almost impossible to believe that you wouldn't be able to get behind, like, I don't know, I guess maybe some antinatalists would be like, you know, no, let the earth die, kill it if you have to, but um and to be clear, I don't like hate antinatalists. I am no longer one myself, you know. The leftist cucks did a fantastic video on antinatalism that by the end convinced me away from it. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, even so, I feel like you'd probably, there's something else in the movie that might appeal to you, you know. But I get, you know, if you don't know enough about the characters, and you know, there are other movies where I think that's a major problem. I don't know if the Friday the 13th movies would be better if the characters were more, you know, detailed, sketched out. But I think it would be a step, you know. But I don't know if those movies. I'm not sure anyone working on them were trying to make like something amazing. They you know, there's one or two of them that have like something to say. Like, there's definitely some commentary on American, you know, culture regarding violence in shit. What's it called again? Jason Goes to Hell. Um. Anyway, I think that might cover that aspect. So yeah, um, the acting is genuinely so fucking good. This is some of my favorite work of several of these actors. Um, Before I go to, I one thing I want to say is, so they have the ship has a computer, and the computer, it's one of those, you know, you can talk to, you can have it respond to you verbally. And it's funny to think, you know, that used to be like, wow, in the future, you know, astronauts will get to, and now all of us can, you know, like, I could turn off the camera now and go and, like, you know, voice interface with a chat button or something, you know. But yeah, once you have that, there is a decision to make about, do you, and this is something Boyle himself talks about in the commentary track. Um, do you use playback, or do you have the actor nearby and let, you know, the actor who voices the computer? Or yeah, because if you have them nearby, then there can be an actual conversation, you know, and that's what they went for, and I'm so glad, because it adds so much. Boyle himself points out, there are times where one of them will interrupt the computer or vice versa. It feels like a conversation. Like you never feel like, oh, that's like they trapped a human being or something. You accept that it's a computer, but it is a computer that is capable of having an actual conversation. And yeah, I'm so glad they made that call. And he points out, it costs more money. It's more expensive to have her on set than to just bring her in for 1 or 2 days of ADR. I guess I'll just briefly, since I've brought up the commentary track several times, Dr. Cox. He has this, like, he can be very direct, like very, very no nonsense as a scientist, but he also does have a sense of humor, and he takes, deserved pride in science. He at one point bets the viewer £10 that they would, within a certain number of years, be able to do a certain thing that I am not even going to try because I cannot explain it. Yeah, he said, well, if you're watching this, X amount of years from now, maybe I don't know, contact me and I'll send you £10 if I'm wrong. Now, so with the acting, I guess I'll just briefly talk about Cillian Murphy. He's sort of a chameleon. He can do almost any, like I've seen him play such different roles across the movies that he's done. And yeah, like in 28 Days Later, he slots so effortlessly into the white male protagonist that is, fairly straightforward and or a douchebag that Garland likes to write. Not too much douchebaggery for the Cillian part. That's more, Leo in real life. I mean, the beach and real life. When it comes to dating preferences, I do appreciate that he at least seems to be fairly progressive in some ways, as we all should be. Now, Cillian, it's this thing of like, because there's, both a commentary track and some behind the scenes with the actual Dr. Cox, he is essentially who Cillian is supposed to be like, and there was a conversation where Boyle pointed to Dr. Cox and said, see, that's what I want. That's what, the performance should be like, and there's the time in the commentary track where Dr. Cox says, I'm not saying I'm as attractive as Cillian Murphy. But he did get cast in part because he resembles me. So I asked him to share his fee with me, and he declined. That wonderful, dry British wit. I will be reviewing some other British stuff, some more witty British stuff at some point in the future. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, like with Murphy, there is this. All of the characters have a certain determination to them. Cillian's character, Kappa, there is this, like, is that a spoiler? He finds a certain thing very fascinating, and I thought that really worked. Yeah. We have the I don't know if I'm going to talk about all of them. I guess I'll. Okay, so the captain, Canada. There is like they. I'm afraid I forget his name, but they did cast an East Asian actor, and yeah, there is this sense of like duty bound. You know, he there's of a ship full of no nonsense. He is the most no nonsense, the least nonsense. Rose Byrne plays Cassie, and she's essentially the she's the one that like talks to people when they have something that they really need to talk about, you know? And there is this like sweetness and tenderness to her that is just wonderful and contrasts so dramatically with the harshness of some of the circumstance, you know? And yeah, I mean, she was almost directed by Boyle in 28 Weeks Later. And then Boyle went and made this one instead, and she was able to be in both. So she did get to be directed by him. And from what I understand, it was a mutually, you know, they liked working together here. And the Michelle Yeoh, I mean, she's so fucking amazing. She does not get to flex her acting talent quite as much here as in Everything Everywhere All at Once, where she was truly breathtaking. Like, just, yeah. That movie's worth watching multiple times just for her performance. Also, Jamie Lee Curtis's performance in that movie. Anyway, yeah, she's really great. She plays Corazon, often shortened to Cora. And it's one of those things where I guess Garland just didn't want to go search for a place through the script, because you would guess from the name that they would cast, you know, a Latina. And I think originally they intended to, but Michelle Yeoh was, you know, so impressive that Boyle was like, you can have your pick of the litter. Like, choose any character. I will gender swap. Like, the Chuds are gonna, you know, make a lot of slop videos about how terrible that is, but I'm willing to do it. And she was most attracted to this character, and it shows. It doesn't feel like, you know, for hire contractual kind of thing. She really pours her heart and soul into the character. She Corazon manages the oxygen garden, and yeah, it means the world to her, you know, and it is this wonderful thing of like, I mean, yeah, that makes so much sense. So, okay, the oxygen garden obviously produces oxygen, which, yeah, one of those things, you know, as soon as you are in this confined space, you're gonna need oxygen, and that's something that plants can make for us, you know? And they also get fresh fruits and vegetables for eating, you know? It's such a, yeah. Um, I forget if, yeah, I don't keep up enough with, I feel like I should. I admire their work, but I don't keep up much with like space stuff. But if they haven't already, I feel like it's maybe coming, maybe, perhaps not on a ship, but maybe on like a space station, or if they do start making like bases on like the moon or Mars or something. Now, I think that pretty well covers her. Then we have Mace. Um, I think there's a tendency to kind of dismiss Chris Chris Evans, because like a lot of people just see that he's pretty, and I acknowledge some of the roles he used to take. I get why. I mean, he did make like 2 movies where he and Scarlett Johansson have some kind of relationship with one another, or appear in scenes. I think I haven't watched either of them before they, both joined the MCU, and yeah, I think sometimes it does. He gets these roles that don't really show how talented he is. I think some of the MCU did let him really show that. And other than that, yeah, you see it in stuff like this and Push. There's a I will admit, I myself fell into the trap of, some years ago thinking, okay, so he has 2 modes. He's either obnoxious douchebag, because he's got that amazing shit-eating grin that just, like, I'm told, at some point I will watch them, I swear. I'm told that he puts the shit-eating grin to tremendous, effect in Knives Out, a movie that I at some point will have to watch, because I fucking love that whole subgenre, and I've heard so many amazing things. In general, I gotta watch more Rian Johnson. Anyway, but yeah, I used to think Chris Evans, he either plays a douchebag, like he, for example, does in the Fantastic Four movies, and what's it called again? That parody movie of teen raunchy teen comedies. Not another teen movie. That's it. I mean, from what I recall, he does do a solid job there. Like, he understood the assignment. The grin, like, he just immediately were like, oh fuck this guy, god damn, what an asshole. And yeah, either sort into that or like Pretty Boy, like romantic comedy, perhaps with Scarlett Johansson, and he's like nice and conventionally attractive, and that's kind of it. And that's the thing, like, you got to be careful not to judge actors too harshly based on that. Like, Mark Ruffalo, fucking amazing, one of my favorite actors. Not only because he's actually really fucking good on Palestine, but incredibly talented. You would never know it if the only thing you saw him in was like 13 going on 30, yeah. But yeah, this is one of those cases where Evans really does, like, he 100% understands the assignment, and it's this thing of fairly early he shows some aggression, and you might find yourself thinking, oh, so that's his character, he's like the out of control one, he's gonna be a liability to the mission. But he actually really, like, he accepts that he fucked up, and he tries to fix it. And I'm not going to give away whether or not he succeeds, but he really does, like, the performance is solid for that. Because if he really was untalented and just like he can't really, if you ask him to play a douchebag and at least some of it, that's it. He's the douchebag. There's a little bit of douchebaggery here for him. Maybe that's where Garland put it. But no, like, he 100% understands it. Like, you never get the sense, I never got the sense, I can only speak for myself, that he wasn't devoted to the mission. And it's also interesting, yeah, like, this did come out the same year as second Fantastic Four movie, Very, very different. That's a case where I think that's in part also the writing more than his talent. They kind of struggled to move him out of to give him something to do other than be a douchebag. And I acknowledge him. I've read the fucking comics. Johnny Storm can be a real fucking douchebag, but that's not all he is. And a feature film definitely needs him to be more than that. And that's one of a number of places where I think the MCU Fantastic Four First Steps, huge improvement on all the other ones. I'm so glad we finally have a good Fantastic Four movie. Yeah, I think that does pretty well cover. So, who is left? Benedict Wong, or Benny Wong, as he's referred to by some of the crew at least. Incredible work. He plays Trey, and yeah, I will just say about him that he carries. There's a bit of a burden on his shoulders. But yeah, like before shit hits the fan, like he's cooking for them, and the just yeah, you get a real sense, and he seems to really love getting to cook, and that is I hate when listen, to be clear, let me make 100%. I am not saying that there's something wrong with not wanting to be domestic, especially if you're a woman. What I am saying is, if you are in a situation where you're not too exhausted, and it's not like because the other person feels entitled to it, but just that you want to and you are able to, then it is wonderful to get to cook for someone you care about. Like, it is just so, yeah. I remember, it's not like there was a lot of shit I could make, but I made a pretty decent spaghetti sauce that I don't think I've encountered someone who tried it and just like hated it. They all thought that's pretty good, and that's not to toot my own horn, but it is important for that to be, because otherwise spaghetti can be kind of bland, even if you add salt to the water. Anyway, let's see. I feel like there's at least one character. Right. We have Searle. I'm afraid of... Oh, right. Cliff Curtis. And he is the psych officer. He is there to help make sure that everyone is, like mentally sound. Extremely important for this kind of thing. It literally takes just one. Like, if there is one weak link, the chain will break. That is just a fact. And there is this, like, you genuinely get the sense that, yeah, this guy understands it. You see some of his work, and yeah, he genuinely has these insights. That pretty much just leaves Troy Garrity's... God damn, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Shit. I'm afraid I forget his... Harvey, that's it. And yeah, he is the comms officer. And he's one of the characters where once you hear it, you completely understand. And ultimately, I think it's okay that it's not in the movie, because there is enough there, but there is an aspect to his character that is only very subtly, yeah. I don't think it's ever really outright stated in the text of the film. I think this is a good time to mention there's actually a bit of the film where there originally was supposed to be voiceover. And I'm really glad that Boyle came to his senses or was compelled by some, wonderful person, because I gotta say I've watched this movie maybe a dozen times over 15 years or so, and I really think that scene would be much, much lesser if there was voiceover. I 100% understand how you would like the craft of it, because there's like, the camera shows the different characters sometimes one at a time. Yeah, you could easily have it there, but the fact that you don't, and there is at least one character that if you look closely at their face during that particular scene, you will be able to tell, oh, there's something there that, okay. I think that covers every character. Did I already mention the computer voice? Fantastic job as well. She really nails, because that's the thing. It's difficult to do a good, like when we hear, like today, you might do it with AI. I mean, hopefully not. I don't think you should be doing it. Let's see. Pillar of Garbage fairly recently did a video talking about the idea of AI in film production. Anyway, it is not super easy for a human being to make a voice that sounds like a computer, because, like, for one thing, it is difficult to just remove emotion from your voice. That's one of the reasons why I can't stand when people say, "Oh, Arnold Schwarzenegger in the first Terminator." I mean, is that really acting? Yes. Try it yourself. You don't have to show it to anyone, but like, try to just completely remove emotion from your face, your voice, your body language. You could do it in a mirror. You'll find it's not easy. And also think about, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, I'm not saying he's perfect. Definitely not. But, like, you see him in an interview and a lot of his roles, he is, like, very charismatic. He had to remove his charisma because he understood, no, this is what the role requires. There is some robotic stuff going on because that's what's called for there. Here, you want to be careful it shouldn't sound completely robotic, because, as mentioned, at least one character has a conversation with the computer. And as such, you really don't want it to just be this flat robot voice. There has to be a little bit of emotion there, but you also don't want there to be too much, because, again, like, our first instinct when we're having a conversation with someone else is to respond with, like, some sort of emotion that is, that, like, if someone is telling you something sad, you might get sad and express that to them, that sort of thing. You need the actor to be able to respond without emotion, without being robotic, and it's still feeling like an actual dialogue, because it really heightens at least one scene that there is a conversation. It doesn't feel like the computer is just like, I don't know, Google or something. It's important that it feels like, no, there's an AI there. There is, it can think and understand. It's not just doing yeah, I think I've made my point. Yeah. The pacing can be fairly relentless. It doesn't immediately kick into high gear, but it starts relatively early. And yeah, after that, it does not particularly let up. Now, the special effects. I have really thought about it, and I'm not sure I can think of any other movie from 2007 where I would say the effects were quite this good. You know, I already mentioned Fantastic Four 2 twice. I apologize for reminding you that those two movies exist. Let's see. I mean, it was the same year as Resident Evil Extinction. I'm not sure I can offhand think of other like movies with a budget that had special effects from that particular year, but you know, um, just 1 year after, you know, they were much more careful to only include effects that looked convincing in, you know, MCU. I'm not saying all of MCU, but early MCU tended towards that. Um, and some of the more recent stuff, just not all of it. But yeah, with this one, I mean, part of it is that they really do use practical effects as much as at all possible, which, you know, when you're making a space movie, there is a bunch of stuff that you can do practically. You know, to get the obvious one out of the way, model shots. You know, if you're trying to make a ship, yeah, models. And let's see, I think I want to move on to, so they do use CGI in this, and I'm not sure I can think of a shot where it really just didn't work. um I don't know, if you think that there is at least one bit, please let me know in the comments, because obviously I don't want to be saying that it is completely flawless if it isn't. But you know, having just finished watching it right before I hit record on this video, I'm not sure I can think of a bit where it wasn't completely seamless. And you know, part of it is that they're so smart in how they use it. Some stuff that you might, you know, expect to see is just only briefly shown or maybe implied or that sort of thing. And yeah, um, I really am amazed by, and I, if I recall, Boyle himself points out in the commentary track, or maybe it's Cox, but in one of the commentary tracks, there's one particular bit where they're like, "Look at this! This looks so fucking good," you know. And it's also one of those places where horror and or sci-fi can really fall apart if the effects just are not convincing. And if there aren't enough of them, it can be very difficult to sell certain sci-fi concepts. You have to show at least some. Um, and that's, you know, one of the places where you can see, like, I've watched more than I should of like really, really genuinely cheap sci-fi movies, you know, and yeah, like you notice, wow, they're really not showing very much. I remember, I don't remember which one, but I distinctly recall one scene where they're literally explaining stuff that's off screen because they can't show it, you know, and like you get to a point where you just feel like, why'd you make the movie? Like you don't have to make, you know, if you, and you know, of course it's because some suit thought, oh, we can make some money by making something cheap here. Anyway, it bothers me when movies are made without passion. I really think that sucks. I think that might cover the effects. So the horror here is handled really well. There's at least one jump scare, but it's not really based around that. It is more like tension, suspense, and like intense situations. Like you know, yeah, there's something, there's a threat that they have to deal with, you know. And I think that pretty well covers the, let's see. Um, I mean, I already mentioned how varied the horror is, that they really thought of, like, there's the overarching kind of, theme of, well, it's space shit, but they really did think of, like, okay, what's fucking horrifying that could happen in space or on a spaceship. And it worked. There are so many things in this movie where I'm like, nope, I don't want that to happen to me or anyone I care about. I don't want it to happen to anyone, period. That's Jesus Christ. And yeah, this is one of those sci-fi movies that, like, I've said most of the things I wanted to about that, but like some other sci-fi classics, The Thing 1982, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Alien, and Solaris, the original, this understands that if you're making a serious sci-fi film, in addition to having something that is fascinating, that has us, like, thinking about it after we've watched it, not some, not assembly line crap, in addition to showing us something that is fascinating, you should explore something about humanity, such as, for example, well, what does it do to the human psyche to have that, to experience that? What exactly would one do under those circumstances, And yeah, these movies are all the stronger for it. That is one of the major reasons I recommend Solaris. And yeah, I think the movie handles well the let's go with the stuff that gets it an R rating. I don't want to give too much away. I'll just say nothing felt gratuitous. It all mattered and meant something and has an impact. And I'm not saying that always has to be the case, but here it's the idea, and it absolutely works. Now, I think that more or less covers the yeah. So I think the I guess I want to say I'm almost at the spoiler section, so I'm trying to think of anything left that I really want to make sure to say that isn't a spoiler. And I'll do the ranking. Maybe I'll think of it. So all the Danny Boyle directed movies ranked worst to best, and I love all except for Slumdog Millionaire. So Slumdog Millionaire, Millions, The Beach, Trainspotting, the first one, 28 Days Later, 28 Years Later, and this movie. What can I say? I really feel like it is simply the very best. I remain in awe. I already mentioned, been watching this movie for all these years, and yeah, like, it truly is just astonishing. And I'm going to talk more about it in the spoiler section, but I'm hopefully giving you enough to give you an idea of whether or not you would like to watch it. So the trailers, the teaser is fine to watch before watching the movie. I think the theatrical trailer gives a tiny bit too much away. And I certainly do recommend, perhaps only after, but I forget which, but one of them is cut to Lux Eterna from shit, what's it called again? Requiem for a Dream, and yeah. I'm not sure if this was the one that kicked it off, but there was a while where like trailers would be cut to Lux Aeterna, and no fucking wonder. It's an amazing piece of music. God, I fucking love the way that Aronofsky uses music in his movies. I want to say Clint Mansell is the composer for Requiem, and just like truly gripping. Like you can't take your eyes off. Yeah, I think that is everything that isn't a spoiler at all. Yeah. So the right, I guess okay. So I can't detail it, but yes, this was back when Alex Garland tended to write movies where the last third is very distinctly different from the first two. And I think this might be the one that has been the most divisive, and I understand why. I'm going to discuss my feelings on it in the spoiler section, but for sure, I understand why some people just hate it. I definitely don't go that far, but it is a thing. Yeah. So I rate this 8 terrifying and sometimes mind interesting. Let's go with that. Things that might happen might be extremely dangerous in space and or on a spaceship. Out of 10. And that brings us to the thoughts section. So from here on out, I am spoiling fucking everything about this movie. So do not keep watching if you haven't watched the movie. I'm going to start with a couple of things that aren't really in the movie that I think are worth mentioning. One of the backstories is that Mace dreams about Cassie every night. And I do think that the fact that like clearly she is not interested in him, she has some interest in romantic interest in Kappa. Yeah, that helps like in a way it can help explain why, maybe that's part of why he hates Kappa's guts. Though I do also appreciate, I understand some of it at least. But yeah, in a way, it helps explain why he can be kind of surly, but also maybe the focus, because like part of him deeply wants something that he knows he can't have. Someone, sorry, not to objectify her. So he has to bury himself in work to distract from it. And he is one of the most laser-focused characters, in part because of that. And let's see. One other major thing. Harvey has a family that he desperately wants to go home to. That's why, when they're passing Mercury, he's not looking at it because he's just thinking, are we there yet? Can we please get home so I can hug my partner and my kids again, And that's why he refuses to be left behind on Icarus 1, And I do think that, even if you don't deduce that that's what's going on, it never felt to me, and again, having talked to some of the people that I showed it to, none of them felt like, oh, he's just like selfish for no reason. He's just a fucking asshole, because like it is true, Mace lays it out. Kappa's the only one who can manually detonate the payload, he is the most important person to get back to Icarus too. I think that more or less covers that. Yeah, so let's see. The yes, one more thing. So Searle is in part there because Icarus 1 did not have a psych officer, and they figured that must be the problem. Someone on the ship had a mental health episode, and you know it derailed the mission. That's why it didn't work. And that does end up being the case, with Pinbacker. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think it's terrible that it's not said in the movie. For one thing, you might be able to deduce it. For another, it's not really that important. I don't think that we needed to know that there wasn't one, and that's why Searle on Icarus 1, and that's why Searle is there. Like, okay, because it is already such a strong theme that being that close to the sun would have an impact on your mental health. We see it in Searle, we later see it in Pinbacker. If you also had a line, like, you could, because it would be easy. It wouldn't even, you could make a Garland line where, one of the other, like, yeah, when, Mace says, you're the psych officer and I'm clearly more sane than you, he could immediately have followed that up with, I get that you're here because the suits back home think that the fact that there wasn't a psych officer on Icarus 1 is why it failed. There you go. But you don't want to lay it on too thick because it's important that it functions well as a twist. That's what happened, that Pinbacker, because we learn it fairly late into the movie, Like, we see that message where he is completely fine, and yeah, a little later we see that at some point he became obsessed with the sun and God. I think that's everything that I wanted to say that isn't in the movie. A little bit on the deleted scenes. So one of the deleted scenes is Cora in the garden, where she like smiles, that warm smile that Yo also displays in interviews and such. She seems like just a cool person. Like, you want to hang out with her, Um, and she leans in so some of the water from the oxygen garden can fall on her face, which in the commentary track for the deleted scenes, Boyle calls out as a very explicit reference to Alien. And if I recall, it is deleted scene to have Cora carry the I think it's like radishes. Is that what y'all call them in English? And the orange long ones. And she carries it to Trey, and he takes one, bites off the tip, spits it out, and then takes a bite of and smiles like, it tastes good. So it's stuff. A lot of the stuff, it was just cut for time. It's good stuff. We don't need it. It's just I think it's worth mentioning for people who aren't able to watch it. I think that might more or less. Yeah, other than that, there's a scene where Searle talks about the detonation of the payload, and yeah, that bit is in the movie, but it's with Cassie. I think, is it Searle and Kappa in the deleted scene, or is it Searle on his own? I forget, but um, yeah, it works well. It's good to have Cassie and Kappa scenes. Ultimately, they don't have a huge number of scenes together, but the ones they do are significant. I think, yeah. Other than that, there's a little bit of we see them prepare for going between the two Ikari. Um, and yeah, just cut for time. It's good stuff. I would watch the movie that has all of this integrated. One that I right, and I guess I'll just briefly note one of them is basically just an alternate ending. It's just they shot this original ending and put it on the DVD. You know, it's they showed it to like execs to say, look, this is how we want. You know, this is something we want for the movie. It was part of pitching it. So they put it on the DVD. It's fine. You know, it's the actual ending in the movie is the fully realized version of that. But there is an interesting bit where right before so you know Kappa runs across some of the payload and then he gets to where he inputs a code to get inside and then triggers it. There's a deleted scene there where he runs to the door and then he spots, you know, I am not going to pretend like I 100% understand how Pinbacker beat him there, but maybe there's, you know, maybe there's something deleted that helped explain. Maybe it was edited slightly differently to make that more convincing. It's fine. He's sitting there. They don't really do the split diopter thing there. Right. I have to be careful not to get too technical. I don't mean to be shit. What's the word? Snobbish either. But the split diopter. That's why the you know we can't look directly at. Briefly fucked up the autofocus there. We can't look directly at Pinbacker because that they accomplish that with the split diopter. This is something I'm quoting Danny Boyle directly there. That's also part of why, like, I know what a split diopter is. I don't know that I would necessarily 100% have been sure that that was what they used there if Boyle hadn't said it. Anyway, yes, they don't use that there, and I don't know. Maybe they were originally gonna reshoot that, or maybe I don't know exactly. It feels a little awkward to just be looking at him straight on like that. Anyway, he's sitting there, and he's like talking to Kappa, and he, you know, crap. Okay, hopefully it will still run fine. Yeah. I just got a message that said that it's struggling, but it seems to still be doing okay. I hope I don't know. Sometimes the audio gets weird for this. Anyway, hopefully it's okay. Yeah, yeah, Pinbacker killed a Cassie there, and he sits there and he talks to Kappa some, and he doesn't really try to stop Kappa, and it's short. I th- it's one of those things. I get, you know, cutting for time and such. You know, they don't want to slow down. It just slow it down a little bit. There's, you know, maybe 2 minutes of just talking. Um, meanwhile, like it's, well, you're almost at the critical point. Like maybe hurry up, you know, kind of thing. Um, I do feel like it feels like there is something missing there. And that is sometimes that happens with these Boyle Garland joints where, you know, they remove something and it ends up feeling like there's just something missing because they either didn't replace it, or what they replaced it with feels very different from what there was before, you know, something like that. But yeah, it does feel like there's something missing when he runs down and just, yeah. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't register as much as that if you haven't watched the deleted scene at all. I think that does cover the deleted scenes. So I think most of what I have to say, I'm gonna just do scene by scene. Let's see. The yeah, I think because the yes, scene by scene. So Oh, right. There's the deleted scene where Mace falls asleep in the chair next to Cassie at the computer, and in his sleep he accidentally triggers a thing, and Icarus immediately says, "I can't let you do that, Mace." And Cassie barely even looks up from her book. She reactivates the thing that he accidentally deactivated, or vice versa, or something like that. And then she shoves his feet off the dashboard. And I feel like that, it accomplishes what it accomplishes is accomplished just by seeing Cassie at the computer reading a book. You don't need the yeah. Yes. Let's see. Yes. So at the start of the movie, we see the ship flying and we get the voiceover, and it's such a wonderful, because it's technically exposition. And it's this, yeah. Let's see. I was gonna talk about, I guess it isn't even, because it's not part of the message he sends to his sister, because she knows what he's saying, the details of what he's saying. Yeah, it's not even really justified in the movie. It is just using voiceover in this. you know I've seen some filmmakers say it's technically cheating. Yeah, okay, but you do need it. I'm sorry. I think it would have been really boring if they had a bunch of let's say they had a short animated sequence that showed the thing that he explained. Like, for one thing, let's get onto the ship as soon as possible. And for another, some of what he says would be difficult to convey visually. You know, yeah, I think it works incredibly well to have that there. I'm just glad that they didn't have it during the Mercury scene, which is where Harvey would have been thinking about how he misses home. And the other characters would have had voiceover as well. Um, I think it's an interesting idea. I think I can see how it works in a script or in a novel, that sort of thing. But I'm glad that they decided to not have it there. But yeah, they talk about, yeah. We see, one of the very first things we see is Searle. He asks Icarus, "Can we increase?" And she's like, "I don't know what to tell you, man. This is not good for you." Shit, 9 out of 10 physicists would agree. Don't get this close to the sun to. And yeah, he says, "Well, okay, give me as much as I can handle." And he does wince at it, but he doesn't say, "Okay, turn it back down." He doesn't say, "This was a mistake. I should stop doing this entirely." He continues his obsession throughout the rest of his scenes. And that's obviously, Garland is one of those filmmakers, as is Boyle, really, who like to explore obsession and how destructive it can be to the person and who's obsessed, and other people as well. Um, Similar to Aronofsky, Nolan. Yeah. So yeah, they're sitting at the table, they're eating, and they create this wonderful atmosphere where it really does feel like we're just a bunch of coworkers sitting around a table eating, a meal. And it's just the way that, because Mace, there's enough of a joking tone there, because he is technically saying, "I don't know if I trust you to be this seems dangerous," but it feels more like razzing than him, what's the word? Then it feels like he's saying, "I don't know, man. I think we should maybe watch Searle." I said watch Searle. He spent a lot of time looking at that sun. And I think that might cover that scene. I think they also do a good job in this movie of just gradually establishing, because yeah, you have that scene of them eating at the table where we kind of see the dynamic more than the individuals. But yeah, you also have individual stuff not long after and a little bit before. And yeah, so they travel a little further, and Harvey listens to his space music. I gotta say, Mace, when I don't know, he's the kind of jackass that you're sometimes like, okay, fair enough. But yeah, Harvey points out this is the distress signal from Icarus One, and I gotta say, the sound design on that distress signal, and they knew they had something golden there. They play it at the very end of the end credits again, just to remind us, remember it started, and Boyle says, if you're making a sci-fi story, you need a crew, a ship, and a signal. And that signal, it's apparently based on actual blah blah. I can't actually. I think it's maybe in the IMDb trivia. They talk about it in like somewhere on the DVD. I think that might be where the IMDb trivia got it from. I think, but yeah, it's based on something actual. That's a great idea, but also they did an amazing job making it genuinely sound, because sometimes you'll hear like a distress signal and stuff, like if you aren't like part of that life, you know I myself have had to like focus on, no, like, okay, when you hear an SOS, just like the actual, you hear the like clicking of the machine. I forget what it's called, but the machine that makes clicks for Morse code, if you just hear those clicks, you're not necessarily going to think, oh no, what do we do? It's not an air raid siren, for example. And here it's closer to an air raid siren, like, because the thing is, they got that balance where on the one hand, you hear that signal and you think, they need help, we should go. But on the other hand, there's another part of your lizard brain that's going like, nope, stay away, stay far away. Like, just they fucking nail it. It's so fucking good. I will never tire. Every single time I've watched this movie, you hear that signal several times, and each time it just fucking works. And yeah, they have an actual discussion. I love that about this movie, that when the shit hits the fan, they don't, we don't have this boring bullshit American thing. That's part of the benefit of these movies that are not made in Hollywood. If this was a Hollywood movie, Kappa would have emerged as an action hero fairly early on and been, yeah, been the one to save the day. Like, yeah, he ends up being the one to save the day, but with help, only just barely, and really because of science. He doesn't excel at something physical. Like, yeah, they managed to you know tear the fucking skin off of Pinback, or of his arm at least. But it's not like this big display of machismo or something. At first he fucking gets picked up, and I mean, Pinbacker was about to fucking drop him like a bad habit. Like, he was not in any kind of position to kick ass. It's actually Cassie who saves him rather than the other way around. Um, but yeah, they actually have a conversation. And the thing about, we should have a vote. Oh, we're not going to have a vote. This is not a democracy, and he points out, we only get this one chance, one opportunity to, deliver the payload. And, I forget exactly who points it out, but one of the others points out, yeah, but maybe Icarus One has another effective payload. Maybe that would give us two chances, you know. And so, and I love the bit where I think it's Searle who explains it, and then he says, this decision should be made by one person," and Mace is immediately like, "Let me guess, you?" And I love how, because like on the one hand, you know, you hear that and you think, Jesus Christ, shut the fuck up. Okay? Could you is that a thing that you are capable of doing? Shut the fuck up and let's actually, like, you know, hear him out. You know, like, okay, if he is gonna be making the decision on his own, that's bullshit. But like, don't make the assumption. But on the other hand, we are also thinking, yeah, I mean, Mace makes it clear throughout the movie he wants this mission to succeed. He needs it to succeed. This is crucial. So when he says, "Let me guess, you're the one who's going to make the deciding vote here," he's not, like, he can come across as a jackass, but he's actually being pragmatic. He's saying, if you don't think we should have a debate, you know, like, are you just going to, you know, make this decision? Because like clearly Searle thinks that this might seriously be worth doing, and you know, is and I love the way that that's also something Boyle calls out in the commentary track. The editing, you know, like, we know Kappa is in the room, but he's not like a loud voice in this discussion. And then suddenly it's like, well, you know, no, it's not. You know, Soro's like, no, it's not me. You know, he's not even like defensive about it or anything. He's just like, no, Kappa, and he's sitting there, shit. And I just realized I forgot to include. So yeah, because this is after they pass the part with the yeah, where they can no longer transmit messages to home, you know, which is also part of why the signal was only discovered just now, which is another, you know, in a science fiction movie you'll want to explain something like that. But yeah, so you have the let's see. Yeah, you know, they talk about, well, you know, there's only so many hours left before we can no longer contact Earth. So, and Kappa is in there for a long time, and Mace, you know, becomes very angry. And I love the line, "We have a problem. There's an excess of manliness in the, you know, the room." And they actually have to physically separate the two. And that was also great when, you know, when Kappa is in there and he's talking to his sister, and then we get a little bit of a message there at the end, and some voiceover, you know, with, "If it's a particularly beautiful day, you know, we made it." And I also think this is one of my favorite endings. You know, I'll talk about the last third, but the very ending, the fact that they barely make it, the way that he seems to maybe perceive something in the sun, and the way that it's shown that they made it, and the thing about, you know, oh, there's snow in Australia, because we could see the Sydney Opera House, which was added digitally. Obviously, in real life, they found a place. They filmed in a place where there is just snow at that time of year, at least. But yeah, that really underlines. Yeah, this was necessary. Like, you know, yeah. Uh, I'm afraid I cannot explain the professor. Maybe someone online can tell you, but Dr. Cox talks about what exactly it is, because it's not technically that the sun has burnt out. That won't happen for like 5 billion years, but I'm probably off by, you know, whatever. These numbers are so big that it's essentially incomprehensible anyway. it was something else that they theorize could happen, and maybe what they do in the movie would be a good way to deal with that, you know. Let's see. I think that, yeah. Um, I quite like when, so yeah, and I really love, like, Mace never wavers in his dedication throughout the entire rest of the movie. He is completely devoted to the mission, and yeah, we can understand why he's frustrated about not being able to phone home. But yeah, um, he goes to apologize, and at first, like, Kappa tries to say something as well, and Mace is like, hey, Kappa, it's me, I'm apologizing. And there's like a second or two of silence, and then Kappa goes, was that it? And Mace goes, yes. And Kappa goes, apology accepted. God damn it. I'm sorry, we guys have got to get better. We men have got to get better at communicating our feelings. Like, Jesus Christ. But yeah, they're both, like, they want the same result. So Kappa's willing to accept that nothing of an apology. Um, let's see. I think, yeah, and it is this thing of, like, on some level, Kappa does feel bad about, because he gets that Mace wants to also get get a message home. And yeah, afterwards, he talks to Searle, Mace, and explains, I lost track of time. On at that point, he's ready to admit, was it really Kappa's fault entirely, at least, or was it maybe, because that's another thing that a lot of men struggle with. If they make a mistake, instead of taking accountability, they will blame someone else and get mad at them. Um, Sometimes even, like, physically aggressive like that, and when I was younger, I did sometimes struggle with, you know, taking accountability, and yeah. So it's I really appreciate the movie acknowledging. I mean, look at how Cora and to be fair, it's not all the men in the movie, but you know, doesn't happen with Cora or with Cassie. Cora, like, you might say, oh wow, she's kind of cold when she's talking about Trey, but she's being completely rational. It's not rational to physically assault, which is what happens. Mace physically assaulted Kappa, um, and then they were engaged in a physical fight briefly. That doesn't make any sense. How is that? How the fuck is that gonna get you any closer to communicating with Earth? It doesn't make, yeah. Let's see, but yeah, and the thing about, he says, you're gonna spend some hours in the Earth room, and that's again one of those things, like, yeah, I forget if it's already been done or had been done when the movie came out, but it's the kind of thing that certainly makes a ton of sense. Like, we feel like, yeah, you would have to have a yeah, feel connected to Earth like that. What are they talking about? 16 months? Jesus Christ! Like, that's so fucking long to be away from all of Earth. Like, think about how, like, some people will get, like, seriously homesick just if they leave, the town or city they grow up in. Like, yeah. Um, I'm not sure any of us can fully imagine what it's like to be away from Earth, especially for so long, you know? Um, yeah, I think the thing about, first he sees waves, and then it's made into this tranquil forest. And, he says, oh, bring back the waves. And Zorro says, oh, but it's supposed to be relaxing. And Mace says, I find the waves relaxing. And it is this thing of, like, because he is a very physical, take charge, aggressive, not always physically aggressive, but, you know. So yeah, waves would seem calming to him. I'm not saying there's something wrong with you I'm not even saying those traits are necessarily wrong. Like, there are people that I'm glad were aggressive in, like, I don't know. I think maybe I say it too much, but at this point, it feels like it's so perfectly teed up. In real life, violence should only ever be the last resort. It solves almost no problems. It usually just kicks the can down the road. Violence begets more violence. However, there are times where it is necessary. It was necessary to stop the Nazis in World War II. It was necessary for Stonewall to happen, Now, let's see. I think that does bring us to so yeah, they talk about, okay, we gotta, we will divert course to go to Icarus 1. And Trey, does the calculations, and they go for it. And then, I love that we see it before the characters do. We see the movement, and we see some sunlight get into the oxygen garden, and we see just the way it spreads. It just fucks it up, and we're like, oh shit, oh no no no. And it's not terribly long. I think it's just a few seconds before they realize, fire in the oxygen garden. And Cora runs down there, and the door shuts, thankfully, right in front of her, because she would have fucking burnt to death in there, you know. And that's the thing. Like, notice, I acknowledge it is not the most rational thing to try to run into a room where there's, considering the circumstances. Obviously, if you're a firefighter and you run into a place that has a fire, okay, but under these circumstances, it would not make sense. But it is not driven by anger about something that maybe was your own mistake, as was the case for Mace. It's about that she can't lose these, to her, like, later she finds a tiny little one, and she calls it a baby, a beautiful baby. She doesn't just call it a tiny, I don't actually, sapling, is that what it's called? But yeah, she runs up, and the fire just so intense. God, the image of her sitting there and the fire right behind the glass, And Mace makes this very smart decision. He points out, well, if you flooded with O2, it'll, what did he say? It'll flare out, which is true. That is exactly right. It's just upsetting, and was it Cassie? So one of the others says, but we'll lose the oxygen garden, and he points out we already lost it. I really love how the characters here are able to make such calm, rational decisions under pressure. That's what you want out of, astronauts. And, they do a significant number of like tests to find out if that is the case before they allow someone to be an astronaut. Yeah, let's see. That brings us to the yeah, and then, there's all this billowing smoke, and now Cora has to get the fuck out, and the door closes right before, because, like, holy shit, that has to be so fucking toxic, that smoke. Like, if you get some of that into your lungs, you are fucked. Under these circumstances, you might be able to do something on Earth, but, they don't have med beds there. God, what the fuck? Can you believe Trump tweeting AI? If you say that vaguely enough, if you just say, can you believe that Trump posted to social media some AI video that features himself and something that obviously didn't happen, like, depending on the day, it could refer to any number of different clips that he's now posted to social media that make no fucking sense. Yeah. I think, doesn't that bring us to the yeah. So, they talk about, and Trey is like, well, I had all these numbers in my head. I fucked up, you know. It was off by 1.1 degrees. And the look on their faces, you know, there's this harshness, coldness to their reaction. They are intolerant of mistakes. And I'm afraid I forget if it was Dr. Cox or Doyle who pointed it out, but that was very purposeful. And that was, if I recall correctly, that was based on, there was a time where Cox, I think unconsciously, like just like they were talking, and there was uh, someone said something that doesn't really make sense with the science or something, and the look on his face was like, I can't believe you fucking said that. What are you doing? You know, because like it can be life or death to get this shit right, you know. And Doyle like pointed to him and said, "See, that's the face I want you right." If I recall correctly. And there was also something about like a bullfighter right before they killed the bull. God, I fucking hate bullfighting. Anyway, but yeah, this like merciless face, and they do such a great job, you know. And Trey's already like he would feel like shit even if not for those reactions, but those reactions compound it. Like Jesus. And yeah, like he basically spends the rest of the movie, you know, on a very very high level. Is it antidepressant or something like they say he sleeps 23 hours a day, you know, which yeah, some psychiatric medication will have that effect. Now I think, does that bring us to the yeah, I think it's from one of the commentary tracks. One of them points out, you know, the reason that Trey is the one who has to do it is that the computer is not made for that mission. It has a different mission. You cannot use the computer for that. It has to be manual. And that is apparently how they actually did it back then, or I don't know if they still do it. um, the computer is only set for the specific mission. And that is also a clever way to add the drama, you know. And yeah, like holy shit, I gotta say I would be like I would be as distressed as we for sure see Trey. And yes, I will debate whether or not, you know, there's a theory that, you know, some say that he committed suicide, some say that it was Pinbacker killing him and making it look like a suicide. I'll talk about that later. It would not make me suicidal, but I would be fucking devastated. Anyway, yeah, then they link up with Icarus One, and it's such a great like sort of haunted house vibe. You know, they're walking through all this darkness, and it's just there's just enough light. It's wonderful. Because when we can't see something, we are more likely to be scared. You know, obviously there are things that we can see that are um, quite scary. Um, you know, Trump's second term, for example. But the yeah, uh, let's see, the yeah, they handle it just right. There's just enough light that it doesn't feel like we are actually in complete darkness, but there's so little light that it's off-putting, disturbing, you know. And they managed to get on some light. I love the bit with, you know, oh, they're so dusty. Most of dust is human skin. Jesus Christ. Um, let's see. Did I mention that in the deleted scene right before they go on board, when they're standing there preparing, Mace points out, Sorrow, you're losing your eyesight. Your skin is peeling off. There's too much sun. You know, what the fuck are you doing? Let's see. I think. Oh wait, shit. God damn it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Out of order. This whole system is out of order. Uh, okay. I guess no. I'll return to Icarus One as the crew did, but I will talk a little bit about the heat shield repair. I don't know how I managed to forget that, but yeah, Canada, I might be mispronouncing his name. I'm sorry. Um, he's like, oh, I'll go, and it's like, well, let's assume my job. And Mace, this motherfucker, I volunteer. Okay, I volunteer Kappa, and I love the fact that Kappa doesn't put up a fight, not even verbally. He's just like, all right then, because like on some level, I would argue he does feel guilty about, because if they hadn't diverted course, like it's partially Trey's fault, but it's arguably partially Kappa's fault, right? And I don't have an awful lot to say about it. I thought it was a great way to get the audience up to speed on, okay, so this is how the payload would work. Remember this for the end of the movie. Got that audience? It didn't feel like it was just exposition, because he's like talking through, okay, so it's this and then this and then that, okay, so what are the odds? That's where we need to end up, is determining, it's cost benefit. And to do that, you have to look at the variables. So he goes over what the payload is going to do, um, and the visual there, really, really great. That's a place where you need visuals for this. I think, is that maybe also when you say, or is it later? Maybe it's later when Kappa shows it to Cassie. But it's important that we see how the payload going off is supposed to look, and have it explained verbally, because like, okay, it's, what did they say? A tiny Big Bang inside a star. Okay, when you put it like that, I understand. I would not get that if you didn't say those words, if I just saw the visuals, And it also means that when we see the ending, we understand, okay, yeah, the payload is working. This is what we showed us earlier. Now, I think, wow, where were we? Yeah. So, God damn it, repairing. Yeah. So it's great with the suits, they put on the suits and slowly walk out, and the bit where Cassie like tries to smile and cheer up Kappa. I remember reading a review where someone pointed out, if it's supposed to cheer him up, I don't think it's working. But yeah, we have the let's see, where were we? We got to the part where so yeah, they go out, and it's so, God, the fact that there's no like tether, which it's obviously good for the end of the movie, where it would very much get in the way. um and it's like, I'm not sure they would use something without a tether today, but it is also, it's important for, it heightens the drama, and it does, the let's see. Yeah, I think that is it. But yeah, so they're standing there, and they're like, okay, I think we found it. We can fix this. And then there's the thing about, well, the yeah, the sunlight will be directly on them, not too terribly long, and they manage to fix it just in time. And then Canada chooses to stand there. He tells Kappa, go back, and I'm not sure Canada would have been able to get in anyway. He sacrificed himself, and I appreciate, it's a trope, the East Asian, person sacrificing themselves for the greater good kind of thing. It's not for me to say if this is a respectful depiction of that or not. Just acknowledging the trope. And to be clear, I'm not saying it's a trope in real life. I'm saying in fiction, it is a trope. Obviously, I don't mean to disparage the real life. Yes. now. But yeah, he doesn't even try to get in to the ship. What he does do is turn around, bright eyes, look directly at the sun. And you see his face, and yeah, like there seems to be a realization of some sort. And Searle doesn't say, "You have to come in, like we care about you, we don't want you to die." He asks, "What do you see?" Because what Canada is seeing right now is something Searle would not be able to see. And that is like, earlier we had the thing where the light gets a little too bright and he's like, oh, what, winces. And it reminds me of, I'm afraid I forget the name, but there's this biblical figure that was like knocked straight off the animal they were riding, um, by like a message from God. That's the vibe I get from that bit. And yeah, here he's trying to, is there is I forget which character says it, but there is, I believe, a character in the movie says, looking directly at the sun is seeing the face of God, or something to that effect, something that could be interpreted as that. So, and yeah, it does seem like he sees something. He's not just seeing, yeah, and a really intense, bright light, and yeah, I mean, we used to worship the sun. It does give us life. I completely understand worshiping. I've said before, you know, believe what you want to believe. Don't use it as an excuse to hurt people or in general do unethical things. Many conservative Christians do truly awful things. A lot of the worst things being done today are being done by them, and they're justifying it by saying, "Well, no, I'm allowed to though, because I'm a good Christian." Um, but if you're going to worship something, I think worshiping nature makes more sense than worshiping certain some of the major religions. I don't. Yeah, but I mean, I've met wonderful people from a number of different faiths. Um, I especially want to underline, I've met so many wonderful Muslims here in Denmark. Muslim immigrants from the Middle East to Denmark. Some of the nicest, warmest, most loving, kind, giving, caring people that I've ever met. And I've met some conservative Christians. Some of them can be the coldest, most distant people, even to people they care about, and yeah, because they think it's justified. And I think I've made my point and I'm going to move on. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, it's so, I love the fact that Kappa does genuinely barely make it in. Like he does, but last fucking second. Absolutely. And yeah, so we get to the Icarus 1. I love the little subliminal images of the crew. Eventually, they do find the photo, and apparently, again from commentary, somewhere on the DVD, they talk about, well, they do that. When there is a crew of astronauts, they will take a 0G group photo. And we see the one for both crews in at one point or another in this movie. And in the commentary track, Boyle points out you were not actually supposed to be able to see the subliminal images there because they're like 1/25th of a second. But because they stand in such stark contrast to the dark visuals that they're surrounded by, we are able to perceive at least some of them. I'm not sure we can make out every single crew member, but some of them, like, yeah, like you only get a brief glimpse, but you do see them, in the business we call them cigarette burns. And yeah, I quite appreciate the little jump scare, something gets knocked over and falls down, it's just like, oh, because like, and I think it's Mace who makes the joke, we should split up. Bad idea. Good thinking. We might get picked off one by an alien, So yeah, because describes certain, you know, horror sci-fi movies, some of which have a lot of jump scares. And yeah, they do end up splitting up and, you know, gradually getting some light on. And Mace is able to deduce, the sabotage that took place and, notes, we're not flying this ship anywhere. That's not a thing that's going to happen. And I do kind of love the way that, yeah, technically this diversion ends up almost meaning the mission is a failure. If they had stayed entirely on target, the movie would have been kind of boring. But yeah, they specifically, they pick up this distress signal, which, Pinbacker left because he figured, what if they send another ship, And, we have the thing about, we mined all of Earth's fissile materials in order to make this. There's no more, there is no Icarus 3, and it would bother me that so much of the movie is devoted to this thing that ends up not working, if not for the fact that, we have the really effective thematic material, because Pinbacker, like, ultimately, I think it's Boyle on the commentary track who outright says, Pinbacker is a religious fundamentalist. He doesn't think we should do anything to improve our situation. He says, God has decided it is our time, and I mean, Jesus Christ, if we all believed that, you realize we would still die at like age 30 something from a fucking toothache. Like, you know, conservative Christians who just decide that, oh, this is the way things should be, and run other people's lives, that really frustrates me. I'm especially talking about the ones that have some measure of power, not like the average. I get that, a lot of people, they stay with the religion that they were raised in, so I'm not blaming every single individual one of them, but the powerful ones could just do something else. We know that because every time they have a chance, they make a horrible choice. And I don't know, I just feel like maybe tax exemption is a relic and should be done away with for extremely wealthy churches. Yeah, moving on. Especially the ones that talk about politics. Now I'm moving on. Yeah. So the yeah, and that is like both Icarus ships and the initial crew represent the idea that we should fight until the bitter end to you know yeah, to fix things that are like, because I mean, that is a really scary way to die. Yeah, and Pinbacker feels that they shouldn't, and I think it's noteworthy that over the course of the movie, Searle, Canada, Kappa, and Pinbacker all have a religious experience with the sun. Of the four of them, Pinbacker is the only one who feels that they shouldn't heal the sun. I'll acknowledge that we only have a brief, like, we don't spend a lot of time with Canada, and I mean, with Searle, it's more of a gradual thing, but we don't spend a lot of time with Canada or Kappa after they come face to face with Mr. Sun. But when you look at their face, do you think that what you see there is regret, a sense that, oh, we're doing wrong by feeling the sun. Because I absolutely do not. I get the sense that they're thinking like that it's, they're fully appreciating, because if we want to read the movie as there is a god in the sun, because I mean obviously you don't have to read it that way. Let's see. I think it was Boyle, when making the movie, went from agnostic to atheist, whereas Garland, was it that he affirmed his faith or something? I forget the detail, but I've read that was, yeah. So even the writer and director don't agree um, across. So yeah. Let's see. I think the because the thing is, you could read it as there is, either there is no God, or at the very least, God is not someone you can perceive through the sun. Maybe they're just too close to it, because unquestionably, Pinbacker ended up like really negatively affected by it, and that's also like he spent 7 years with nothing but the sun. And there are cases in real life where someone did nothing but just dive deeper and deeper into their faith, and it ended up being really detrimental to them. So that's what we're seeing with him, and maybe with the others we're seeing the beginnings of it. I love the fact that we never see a face in the sun. We see the sun, we see the sun at different points in the movie, different intensities, and how close it is and such. We never see a face in there. I've watched the movie a dozen times. I've looked. There is no face in there that we can perceive. It's possible the characters can, and it's possible there's nothing there, but just the overwhelming nature of being so close to something that is so crucial to our life and survival. I understand worshiping the sun. I 100% do. I wouldn't do it myself. I don't really. I don't think I worship anything. There are people and institutions I hold in very high regard, but I don't think I worship anything. I haven't ever really done it. I don't think I ever will. But if I were to worship anything, it would almost definitely be nature, and again, certain institutions that go out of their way to make the world a better place. Now, let's see. I think. And there's obviously also, there are people out there who are, you know they have some chance to make the world a better place, and sometimes they'll really choose not to. If you haven't already watched Queen Coke Francis uh, rank the people of the Riyadh Comedy Festival, it's a really solid video. In general, pretty big fan of Francis. Only discovered them fairly recently. And to be clear, it's not Francis that's making the world a worse place. I'm talking about the Riyadh, the comedians, and occasional person who I didn't know they were a comedian. I'm not sure I'm 100% believing that they actually are. Now, I think that pretty well brings us to the, let's see. Uh, yeah, so they get they realize that they can't use the ship, and we have the pinbacker. I love the little effect on, there's like the bars are like shifting, so Pinbacker's face looks all fucked up before we even see how fucked up he really looks now. And earlier we got that other message where he starts out essentially like enamored. He's like, wow, the sun, it's really amazing. And then later yeah, he's evangelizing essentially, and that worked really well. The way that the computer screen will just pop on, and then we see his face, and he's talking. But yeah, so they, suddenly there is there's this decoupling, I think it's called, and they're like, oh shit, we got to get back, and so they run there, and it's like, how are we gonna, like, there's, what was it, like 20 meters through just space, and they start like rapping like mummies, and Harvey saying, I'm giving you a direct order, get out of that suit, and Mace is pointing out, if he doesn't live and the computer can't, and that does turn out at the end of the movie, he has to manually start the payload because the computer is not able to do it, so yeah. um and apparently it is realistic, authentic, largely. you know what was it like, keep your mouth shut, keep your eyes shut, and you yeah, try to cover, and he does get like fruit free frozen fruit, yeah, whatever the fuck it's called. um and that was also such a great the bit of setup. I will say that that does feel a little bit set up-y when he goes to, oh, you gotta fix the coolant, and he drops the tool, and he reaches in, and oh, it's so cold, I hope I don't have to go back in there. Like, it's a tiny bit. I don't know that I thought about it the very first time I watched it, but on repeat viewing, I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking like, wow, I really should have seen coming that he's gonna have to be further submerged in there. Poor guy, just like, maybe this is why he played Johnny Storm, because he really needed to heat up to make up for all the frozen shit that happens to him in this movie. But yeah, so they managed to get across, but they lose Harvey, and he tears open, and we see him just freeze, and apparently, like, Cox explains, it wouldn't happen quite that quick, but yeah, it would happen, And it's one of those things where I almost feel like I'm kind of relieved that they don't show how long it, because like, imagine, god damn it, imagine if he's just stuck out there and he has the realization, I'm gonna freeze to death, and then you cut back, and then they're like, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. He's gonna freeze to death out there, and it's gonna take X amount of time. I'm sorry. At that point, okay, can the movie be over now? Because I need to deal with how goddamn terrifying that idea is, freezing to death in the vacuum of space, and it's not even particularly fast. Like, I forget how long he's. See, that's how fucked up I mean, other than that, memory being shit by now, but yeah. I don't even remember, because like, I think I immediately just said, nope, that's not something I want to ever think about. That's I know I've said it before, but freezing to death has got to be one of the most horrifying ways to go. So I do appreciate it. And I'm pretty sure it's CG. It looks very convincing, and ice is not super easy to do. Am I remembering right that it did not look particularly good in fuck's it called again? The Day After Tomorrow. I feel like there's ice in that movie that just does not look convincing, because we know more or less what ice looks like. I suppose maybe not every individual, but um, yeah, there's reasons why ice is difficult to make convincing with CG. But yeah, the others did make it back, and there's the conversation. I mean, why was the thing decoupled? And they're like, well, Cassie and Cora were in the control room the entire time, and I think it's like, I was with Searle, and I think we can agree Harvey didn't do it. And I love the way it's I think it's Doyle on the commentary track points out he was worried that the scene was going to get cut because it's like several minutes of just conversation. It's just people talking to each other, but it's so compelling. And part of it is the very claustrophobic, like real close up, like their faces are in our faces. Um, and it is also really compelling dialogue and well delivered. And yeah, like you find yourself, it's this paranoia that's really like, well, what the fuck? What did happen? And let's see. Uh, oh right, shit. Didn't Searle also die during that? He's the one who gets like smashed. Like he freezes and gets smashed. Am I thinking of Harley? Shit. Yeah, memory. Uh, yes, and they have a conversation about Cora points out the with all the oxygen we lost from the garden, there's not enough oxygen for or wait, was that an earlier? Yeah, there was yeah. So the thing about 3 out of 7, that's a lot of short straws, and then they have the thing, and then come back and it's like, well, I mean, if Trey were dead. And I love the way that because god damn it, Garland is so fucking good at this. These ethical issues where you really find yourself thinking, what would I do in this situation? Like, what is the right thing to do? Um, yeah, I I don't know if I think I would be with Cassie. I think that is how I would not be able to say yes, go ahead and do it. And the cold rationality that the others display is like gripping, because like they all know they have to, like Cassie doesn't even like I it's not that she's gonna be able, it's not like she'd be able to do anything to stop them, but she doesn't say this doesn't make sense. She doesn't make up a million excuses or anything. She just says, I am not going to condone it. And then when she realizes it's going to happen, she says, find a kindness, because he's a human being. And right, I get this. Is this around the time? I don't have an awful lot to say about I've said most of what I wanted to say about the Kappa, explaining about the process to Cassie. But I love the thing about, she's like, are you afraid of it? No, I think it'll be beautiful. And Cox on the commentary track says, that's the scientific experience. We call a lot of things beautiful, and we find fascination in these real things, and we try not to worry about, and he even at one point, like, I admire his ability to come back to being like just, you know, yeah, this dry-witted, he doesn't seem like a misanthrope or anything, but he does at one point say that it is important to realize that technically it is meaningless. I think that is what he said. It was something like that. I'm not trying to, like, I don't hate him. I don't think anybody should hate him. Um, but yeah, he says something along those lines. And yeah, like, I think it is, you know, it's important to keep in mind some of these harsh truths, because they're not going to go away just from us ignoring them. I would not go so far as to say that it is meaningless. I think it's meaningless to live a life where you only seek to pleasure yourself. Greed, I think, is meaningless and self-destructive. But I don't think human life is meaningless. And it's possible that I'm misremembering, but it was a very harsh idea that he presented there. And then he also says, it's beautiful. I admire his ability to have both coexist, because I don't think they are in contradiction of one another. Now, let's see. Yeah, I love the thing about, the dream talk, good dream? It's the surface of you on the surface of the sun, wasn't it? Only dream I ever have. Every time I close my eyes, that's what I see, And the fact that she's still able to be so sweet and kind and loving to others whilst having this imagery so close to her is so powerful. Just like some people are so compassionate, so capable of loving others. We should all strive to have that level of compassion towards one another. There's so many problems we can only solve if we do. But let's see. I think, does that bring us to the... I feel like there's something I'm missing there. But yeah, that was also great with, later, yeah, he does come very close to the surface of the sun, indeed. He was not supposed to be on the payload originally, but there's no other way. Yeah, so yeah, we have the thing with the, yeah, they have the conversation. And I also, the thing, earlier, Cora is, like, well, we need to deal with the oxygen. And one of them says, you're suggesting we kill Trey? And then she says, well, it wouldn't be enough. Jesus Christ. But yeah, that is the cold rationality. And yeah, she does not have the garden to care for anymore. So it's purely rational now. And she does find the love again when she sees a baby. But yeah, she sorry, the where does that get us? We are at the point where, yeah, so Mace, and I love the thing, I think it's Mace who's, now that Turtle's gone, suddenly they are a democracy. Seems like Mace is consistent on that, and he says it's a vote and it's unanimous. And I love the way that that these little things, like, yeah, Cora says, you know where I stand, and God damn it. I said Mace says, or no, I think he says, you know where I stand, and Cora says, me too. And yeah, Kappa, does really one life versus billions of people? Kill him. Like, he doesn't just say, this is okay. He says, kill him. And yeah, Cassie refuses, says, you're saying you need my vote? I'm saying you can't have it. And then Mace says that he's going to do it. So much for unanimous vote, because he thought he was going to get the unanimous vote. And ultimately, like, no, he's made up his mind. He is going to kill Trey. He would just like for the others to not, what's the word? Yeah, not like try to talk him out of it or something. So he's going to make his case and say, you all have to vote, and just, yeah. Right, the thing where Kappa says, well, we know what happened on Icarus One, the same thing that's happening here. And Mace is like, oh, fuck you. What are you trying to do? Remind us of our lost humanity? And it is, again, this thing of, like, I love these arguments where both are technically right, because, like, yeah, it is important. Like, you cannot let humanity slip through your fingers. You have to hold on tight. Sometimes there are times in our lives where we might feel like, oh, this group of people or this individual is just terrible and we have to do something, and occasionally it's true. I will say that. Like I said, had to stop Hitler, had to stop, had to do Stonewall, the riots, I mean. But so much of life, like, we have to be careful, because it is, like, sometimes the I forget what it's called, but the part of our brain that is so capable of compassion and trying to make a better future for everyone can really be in conflict with the lizard brain, which says that is different. That means it's dangerous. Holy shit, I've been recording for almost 3 fucking hours. I hope this is entertaining. I'm really trying to make sure that it is. and interesting as well. Anyway, yeah, I fucking love this movie. Can you tell? I can talk about this movie for so fucking long. I'm really trying to just keep it to the stuff I find the most fascinating about it, and not yeah. Let's see. Yes, so they are in a way both right there. God damn it, I sound like one of those fucking American centrists. But yeah, you can understand. And yeah, so he goes there and he gets the scalpel. And it is really great the way that, there are two scalpels missing. One of them is with Trey, and the other one is, in Pinbacker's possession. And they linger on that just long enough because, like, Mace doesn't really think anything of the fact that there are two missing. But we notice, and yeah, so he goes into, and Trey's not on the table. Uh, you have to, your tray should be upright. And he goes in and he finds him there, and wrists slit. There's blood on the floor. The scalpel is right there, and he calls in the others and confronts Kappa again. And he says, "I'm just putting this where it belongs," and some of Trey's blood right on Kappa's hands. And again, like 100%, I understand. Like, obviously, it makes perfect sense that Kappa is so angry that he attacks. But I understand where Mace is coming from. This whole thing, like, because like to Mace, this whole fucking thing, like, nobody would have died if Kappa had said, "No, we are staying on course." And it is also this great thing, like, that they spend the entire movie fucking hating each other, like barely tolerating each other. Like, it's not like one of them can, leave so that the other, so that they don't have to, they have to work together, But the let's see, what's the word? God damn it, nuts. It's right on the tip of my tongue. Yes, the God damn it. Yes, the shit. Let's see. It's I swear I'm trying to avoid the dead air that I realize this is there was just now. God damn it. Okay, it's I'm very very close to having it. Yeah, they spend they spend so much time hating it, saying bad words about each other, and then they're at the end. They're both, they each have their mission, and they work. They do what they can to succeed. You know, they're at the end. They don't feel the need to say, "Oh, and by the way, fuck you. I'm glad you're gonna die," or something. Yeah. So I think, does that get us to the so yeah, and I love, Cassie and Cora, and this is called out in the commentary track. They're just so fucking done with these two guys always fighting. So there's just the line, "We don't have that much oxygen. We have to limit our exertions." And the guys can't really argue with that. So it's like, okay, fine, we'll stop fighting. Yeah, I think that brings us to the other part with the thing and the thing. So we have the uh yeah, so he talks to um Icarus, and this is, I think this was on the commentary, where on the commentary track, Doyle talks about having the actress nearby, so she's not so close that they can hear, that they wouldn't be able to hear her if not for the, there is like an earpiece or whatever the fuck. And yeah, it works incredibly well. It's such a compelling conversation, the way that it's yeah. And yeah, we have the thing about, oh, you don't have enough oxygen. Well, what do you mean? We have enough oxygen for, if 4 people. Wait, isn't that? Yeah, there's like 4 of them. Yeah. And then she's like, oh, but there's a 5th crew member. Who's the 5th crew member? Unknown. Where is the 5th crew member? And you just know, oh shit. And I love this was actually, oh my god, I fucking love Danny Boyle's little adjustments most of the time. Because originally there was supposed to be a scene of just a figure sitting menacingly. And instead of just dropping it entirely, they take these little frames from it and overlay as he's hearing, there is a 5th crew member, So we get that because it's like this silhouette shot, I guess. It's what it seems like when it's essentially subliminal, almost subliminal. And yeah, it's not really spelled out in the movie, I think, but in the commentary track they point out, well, yeah, I mean, he just walked across. They didn't close the door. Why would they close the door? They don't expect anyone. It's not impossible that someone's alive on Icarus One, but they certainly don't expect someone on Icarus One to like just walk past them and start sabotaging. Like, why the fuck would they do that? They when they leave the door open, they have no idea that it's sabotage. They think, and also they don't really necessarily expect anyone to still be alive. Also love the thing about, okay, so they burned to death all sitting there, so it's unclear if they chose that or if Pinbacker forced them, but yeah, they were sitting there as the sun burnt them to death, perhaps having religious experiences. Maybe they were part of his cult. Let's see. And I think that's substantially more interesting than just, oh, he went around killing everyone. So let's talk about how near the end he goes around trying to kill everyone. I appreciate that it essentially becomes a slasher after 2/3 of, like, yeah, people are dying in gruesome ways, but it's not an individual antagonist. I want to make sure to separate. I think some people hate it because they hate slashers. That's fine. I am not telling you you're wrong. I have seen fairly few genuinely good slashers. Like, there's a couple of Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Recently talked about, there's 2 Greenlandic slasher movies that are phenomenal. Halloween 1978, 2018, the entire H40 trilogy, I think there's a lot to love about. But yeah, there's so much bad slasher. I already mentioned, Friday the 13th. It's essentially fast food. Yeah, the I'm not telling you you're wrong for hating it if that is why. In general, I'm not really telling anyone they're wrong for hating it. I do want to make a distinction. Some of the people who hate that it becomes a slasher don't hate slashers. They just think that it's wrong for this. And that is something that with several of these, Garland runs into this. Like, the last third of some of his movies is just so substantially different in a way that feels like it essentially becomes a different movie. And I do think that it is very awkward that it becomes like a slasher, because the first 2/3 really don't feel like a slasher at all. I do think that there being an antagonist with a face and a voice and a physical presence here at the end works well for the themes, because I've already mentioned, Pinbacker, and I guess maybe the rest of the crew of Icarus One, fundamentalists, whereas the Icarus Two crew, who have a religious experience, don't end up that way. And the to have a face-to-face with a religious fundamentalist there at the end, considering how much of the movie is about, I mean, essentially, so the core of the movie is this small group of people on this ship with this payload are going to save Earth because of the sun. And the first time we see Searle, he's already obsessed with the sun. Like, it started before he, before the movie started. And also we have this thing of, he tells himself that he's doing science. He's just, well, he's the guinea pig. He's the one testing, you know. But is he, or is he just obsessed with the sun? Did he fall for what Pinbacker fell for, essentially? So they brought, a psych officer. They should have brought a poet. And he accidentally does the exact thing that he was essentially supposed to prevent the others from doing. So if he wasn't on the ship, no one on the ship would be obsessed with the sun, or at least not to that extent. And this is set up immediately because that's the first thing Mace says to, at least to Searle. I don't think he has any lines before that, actually. I forget. So hypothetically, let's say that it ended without that. Let's say that stuff went wrong for other reasons, more mistakes. Someone else, someone other than Trey makes some mistake. You could still have a bunch of people die and have more or less the same ending, just without an antagonist of any kind. Everyone on the ship died. Nobody was able to turn off the distress signal before they died. Or maybe they thought that they wouldn't die, so they left it on. Whatever. I think the movie would lose a lot. I appreciate. I don't love that it is so slasherly, because it does feel like it's essentially a different movie in a way that I don't think is completely beneficial. But the fact that there is an antagonist, that yeah, I've made my point. I'm moving on. I think, and it is also just, fucking Mark Strong, this was also, this was, I don't know if it was this movie specifically, but it was right around here. I think it was that particular year, 2007, where because he was in that other movie. He was in like a Leo movie, I think. Wait, was that 2007? It was around that time, whatever. That was Mark Strong being discovered, and he's had a bunch of roles since then. He makes a really mean antagonist, so I'm really glad that he got to show how talented he is. He's not given that much dialogue or screen time, but he fucking nails every moment of it. And I love the contrast between him just being chipper about this and being full-on religious fundy. Yeah, I think that does bring us to, yeah, I think it was important that there be some threat. And I think the fact that it is a human threat works. Yeah, the fact that it's a slasher, I think, is where we have an issue. And to me, that is the issue. I don't think there's really any other problem with that overall. Yeah. Some people take issue with the way that it's filmed and edited. I already mentioned split diopter. Yeah, essentially you can't look directly at him. He's too bright. He is part sun, essentially, and that, I think, is fair to criticize as feeling out of place for a movie that's up to that point been so based in science. I don't have a problem with the idea that he was able to survive period, because, oh, look at all this unchecked growth. Yeah, there was plenty of food for him, plenty of oxygen, um, but he has burns all over his body. He has, it's made clear he has been staying in the observation room for an obscene amount of time, getting burnt over and over. And, I mean, essentially, I guess, okay, either hypothetically Canada did survive and is just in there in the sun now, or it was too much because he was enveloped by it, whereas, for the whole thing, whereas for Pinbacker, it was the light itself. He wasn't physically inside sun. But yeah, I don't love that. I think again, we needed something, and the fact that he is like, he's essentially an emissary. He thinks he's fucking Moses or something, and that is the fact that he's not still completely human does work for that. I just don't know if yeah. I think I've made my point. I'm moving on. Let's see. I don't think that it's bad that the camera, and because it's supposed to be disorienting. We're not supposed to be able to fully get our bearings during some of the scenes with him. The ones where he's hiding and trying to attack and attacking, stuff like that. I think that works. Again, the genre thing is. I'm trying to avoid repeating myself. Yeah, so Kappa goes to the observation room and sees, this person that he doesn't recognize sunbathing. It is one hell of a tanning salon, and he pretty quickly realizes, you're Pinbacker, and yeah, essentially he breaks Icarus 2 the way he broke Icarus 1, the thing with the getting the computer out of the coolant. And that is, again, I'm not 100% sure if that's how it would work, but it makes sense because computers run hot and you have to cool them down. A computer like that would definitely run very hot, so that is a clever way to do that, and it's very easy to understand, okay, so he broke the computer by taking it out of it and leaving it out of the coolant for a very long time. Mace has to get the computer back into the coolant. Very, very nicely done. It's very easy to understand without them having to handhold. Yeah. So he talks to him and gets, slashed. And, they have the exchange, are you an angel? They live on the moons of Iago, I think. Yeah, Boyle himself points out, I didn't mean to reference Star Wars in the commentary track of that particular scene. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the line does essentially work, and it is like, yeah, he's confused. He thinks that he might encounter an angel here, and he even says something along the lines of, "Is it time?" And then once he realizes, oh, this is human, he starts attacking, because that's where his head's at. He thinks that, any human being still trying to fix the sun, he has to take them out. And yeah, so Kappa manages to run away and close the door and lock it from his side, and then, Pinbacker's like, well, two can play that game, motherfucker. And, Kappa, very clever, he can't quite bandage his cut or clean it or anything. He has to do something, so he puts on the thing that he puts on, to put some pressure on. Very smart. If he like considering the physical exertions that we see not long after, yeah, he might bleed out, or at the very least bleed so much that he passes out, and then the bomb, yeah. Let's see. So yeah, and he, because of the slash, he dropped the thing with because it's the string that was holding it around his neck was slashed, so he can't contact the others, and yeah, really, really nicely done there. And yeah, Cora goes to the garden and she's so despondent, and then she sees, a baby. And then suddenly, the I guess so if you're trying to use a scalpel for surgery, you really wouldn't want it like vibrating like that. But I mean, I guess maybe there could be a situation where you would need whatever. I can accept that. I have made fun of it in the past, but yeah, he sticks it in. He sets it to vibrate, and it's this thing that again Garland does so well. There's the glimmer of hope, and then it's extinguished. But was the fact that there was hope, does that like carry over? Is there a transitive logic here, or does that mean that the hope is gone? Because like at the end of the day, like the movie's not completely over when she dies, and we do win. We get the son back, so it's a really solid, and that again goes with this interpretation of like religion, like um the single little sapling, like there maybe we can rebuild, maybe we can fix it, and technically he does. He does to do the spark thing. Yeah, so I think, God, I'm sorry, I'm a little discombobulated. The daylight savings thing kind of fucked with my yeah, trying to push through it. But yeah, um there's the bit where Cassie is hiding and she has to like be very quiet because she's hunting fundies. She's hunting Panbacker. Uh, and the way that, yeah, so he's behind, and he reaches through and she manages to stab him a couple of times. That was a good, yeah. Um, See, I think something that helps this last third is there's not actually all that much of just him hiding and playing cat and mouse and chasing people. Like, there's a little bit of conversation, brief bit of slasher stuff, and after that, yeah, he attacks there at the end, but not with a weapon, and there's more conversation. It's a scene that helps explain his character and explore this difference, because fundamentally they are both thinking about the same thing. They just come down on different sides of it, to the point where one of them has to, there's no compromise here. One of them is going to win and the other will lose. Um, yeah, I think also the split diopter, they don't overuse it. Like if they did, then I would 100%, like I've said it before, at some point I will do a proper review of the entire movie. Last time I watched, God damn it, what's it called again? Resident Evil Apocalypse, the second Resident Evil movie by Paul W. Anderson. Last time I watched that, maybe 10 years ago, I thought it was exhausting. When I watched it when it came out, I loved the pacing. I thought, oh yeah, we got to have movies that move this fast, because I was a fucking teenager. But yeah, um, I think it could easily be, and there's also like if it tried to constantly have this really far out cinematography, like the Crank movies and Gamer, I think that would be wrong for this. I think it works really well in the Crank movies. Um, yeah, I think, doesn't that bring us to the, let's see. Yeah, so the mace in the coolant. God damn it, that's so fucking intense. And so, ugh. At least it seems like, because like that's one thing. Like you might pass out within not terribly long. Um, that's the more merciful way to freeze to death. But yeah, he's like, well, I gotta get the computer back down to the coolant, and it's not letting me, so I have to go into the coolant and pull it down. Jesus Christ! And he contacts, he's like, you gotta do it. You're the last hope. And yeah, Kappa, he's gotta get across the bit of space to the payload. He's got to start the timer, which is also, classic for this sort of, sci-fi horror in space. There's got to be a countdown of some kind. And he's putting on the suit. He briefly takes off the helmet and goes, "I'm gonna miss you guys." I mean, they point out Kenny, from South Park being an inspiration in the commentary track, but yeah, and then he trips, and it's this wonderful moment of like, I mean, it's almost kind of funny because it's like, you trip, because obviously of course he's gonna trip. The suit's not made for the walking around in there. I think that's also mentioned in the commentary track. I'm not taking credit for that observation, but he manages to get back up and walk out, and the timer ticking down is like, oh, there's almost no time left, and he jumps and he makes it there because it's like, you're not going to be able to get, yeah. And it flies off and of course gets destroyed by the sun. And I love that we briefly do see Icarus on the part of the exterior of the craft, which is also something pointed out in one of the commentary tracks. And yeah, he gets into the payload. And also, in a commentary track, there's a point about, like, it's not actually that big. They built a little bit of it, and they just film it creatively and to cover that. And there's, like, CG extending so that it looks bigger. Right, and there's also some issues with, originally it was supposed to be like as big as the moon, which is why it has gravity, because, like, if it's only the size of Manhattan, why would it have gravity? I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't have that much shit. You know what? Never mind. I don't know enough about that to make a declarative statement. Anyway, originally it was supposed to be the size of the moon. Then Cox pointed out, do you realize how fucking big he didn't say fucking, the ship would have to be to drag? We're gonna have to decrease the mass, and so Manhattan, because Manhattan Project, they could have described the mass in other ways. It was purposeful, clearly. But yeah, he gets in there, and we just see there's a bloody handprint there. So, somewhere over the payload, Cassie must be. And it's very clever because, yeah, she had time to go there. Yeah, very, very nicely done on that whole. And unfortunately, of course, Pinbacker also had time to go there. So, yeah, very, very effective. And yeah, so he finds her, and they have a brief conversation, and then Pinbacker just picks him up. And that's also the reason that he can just so easily pick up another human being is supposed to be because it has, like, moon gravity, so lighter. And he's gonna, like, drop him, and Cassie, like, even though she's messed up, she gets up and jumps and grabs, and the fucking flesh skin repeat. Ugh, it's so fucked. Yeah, and they manage to get to that other spot, and yeah, she's like, you have to keep going. Finish the mission, Sam. And he goes in, he sets the thing to the yeah, and starts it, and we get the sparks. It's, tiny big bang. And yeah, when he gets really close to the sun, and it slows down, but it seems like there's a little bit of movement, but the sun isn't moving. So is that evidence that there's a god there that doesn't want to hurt him? and he clearly sees something, perceives something, and he reaches out his hand like to shake, the yeah. Um, and yeah, we have the ending with particularly beautiful day, and we see they actually succeeded, like just barely. But yeah, it's just it's such a fucking amazing ending. I think that might cover. But yeah, I do think I 100% appreciate. I understand why some people think the third act ruins the movie, and you know I wish they could love it as much as me, but you're entitled to your opinion. It might even be involuntary. I try not to judge people for involuntary. There's movies where I'm like, ugh, no, don't do that, and end up hating the movie because of it. So I try not to judge others. It's human. We all do it. Um, but I do think if the thing that's putting you off, if it just becomes a slasher movie, if you really look at it, there's not that much screen time devoted to this slasher movie stuff, and it is less. It really is just the let's see, he slashes Kappa and runs after him until they both lock the door. He stabs Cora. He tries to attack Cassie and ends up. Well, let's see. I mean, she die there at the end? I guess maybe he did get her, but she also got him. Something like that. And I mean, I guess hypothetically you could say, oh, but he picks him up there at the end. And, okay, maybe slasher-y, but it's really not that much screen time, and it doesn't actually change the overarching theme. It is in service of it. It is an awkward genre shift, and it is a lot. It is a real, what's the word? It's a lot to ask the audience to accept, that there is this, sun man. Um, but I don't know. It's difficult to see what they could have done that would have been hugely different and wouldn't have yeah. You know, I've said it before, like he makes he writes these scripts where it works really well for the first two thirds. And then when there is the third act, he'll change something in a way that feels, can feel, doesn't necessarily feel um, like it belongs in a different movie. But if you didn't have anything like that at all in there, it would feel a little, yeah, it wouldn't be quite the same. I think, is that everything I wanted to say? God damn it, I've been talking your ear off for 3.5 fucking hours now. Yeah, I think that is everything. That yeah, just absolutely amazing movie. And uh, the I think, God damn it, I feel like there's one more thing that I really wanted to say. um I don't know, maybe not. um let's see. I think, I guess I'll briefly talk about. So yeah, some theorized that there's basically two, the way I see it, two options. Maybe Trey committed suicide. Maybe Pinbacker killed him and made it look like a suicide. Because like either one of them could have taken that first of the scalpels. Maybe Pinbacker just went to grab a scalpel and saw that Trey was there and then left and went to the observation room. That is entirely possible. I certainly I appreciate that it is essentially an unsolvable mystery, in my opinion, because there's equal amounts of evidence to support either. Pinbacker wants them all dead. If he makes it look like suicide, that uh, means he has an easier time tricking the others. But Trey genuinely did, think back to when he goes, "I fucked up." I wouldn't rule out, they even say they call him a suicide risk before, you know, yeah, shit, before they go on um, I'm pretty sure it's before they go on to the, yeah, because it's Searle's decision, isn't it? Before they go on to the Icarus one. Right. I do want to briefly note. So I think it's Cox points it out. So some people say it's kind of silly to name it the Icarus when Icarus, he died because of the sun. And he points out, yeah, technically, but it's important to keep in mind he died because of hubris, not purely because of the sun. Essentially, they name it Icarus because they want to fly as close to the sun as they can without their, what was it, clay wings melting, and it's in part to remind them of the the risk when you fly too close to the sun. It's a phrase for a reason. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, ultimately, I think we'll never know for sure who killed Trey. I don't know. If I had to guess, I think it was Pinbacker. Yeah, for the reasons I already went over, why it might be him, and I'm not saying that the case isn't equally strong for the other. Yeah. Okay, that must be everything. Let's see. Yeah, the let's see. I feel like there's one more thing that let's see. The yeah, I guess the let's see. Right, I thought it was notable when they start talking about, well, we're not gonna be able to go home, and they actually none of them are like, well, fuck this whole thing then. The they are determined to because there's people on Earth that they want to save. Um, yeah, I really appreciate it. I understand why it might have happened. There's the thing about in on the commentary track they talk about, well, one of the Russian cosmonauts said, if you lock someone up in a small confined space for X amount of time, they might, end up killing someone, and that's, part of why Mace attacks Kappa. I also really appreciate the thing about that. That's also something in the commentary track they talk about. He had longer hair, he had a little bit of facial hair, and then he shaves. And for the rest of the movie, after attacking Kappa, and for the rest of the movie, he's completely focused. Like he changes who he is. He let himself go. Is what is being conveyed there, and that is also something, because we saw him, Cassie was reading a book. I don't think she was letting herself go, but you can see how Mace ended up doing so. But yeah, the I quite appreciate it. I don't think it would have worked for the film if when they realized, nobody goes home, if one of them had been like, well, game over, man. Game over.